Is that a printer?
Yes, sorry, I'm printing something. I apologize. I'm trying to mute myself.
Someone else. Or an investor. No, it's just looking on his head. You don't, right? Your work, groceries, kids.
Heather, we can still hear you. Your microphone is still live. And John, your microphone is not live.
Okay.
My microphone? This John?
Chair Jack, your microphone.
Okay.
So Heather, if you can mute your microphone, please. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, you want me muted now?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Thank you. All right. I was, my hardware was muted. Okay.
Yes. Good. Good now, Chair Jack.
Okay. Thanks. All righty. Well, welcome everyone. We'll call to order at 1:31. Dr. Roberts, I was wondering if you could go on mute. Thanks. Okay, so we'll start off today by stating that we are conducting our business today online, which means that we'll be broadcasting and we will post our meeting, the public portions of our meeting, on YouTube and on our website. And if you wish to send a question or participate in the meeting, since we're now after the registration phase, you can do so by sending an email to responses@acrd.bc.ca by email. And that's really the only way that we'll get any questions during the question period of the meeting. We don't really monitor the comments on the live broadcasts. So I'd like to start off formally by recognizing that we're conducting our business today on the territories of principally the Nuu-chah-nulth people, and our offices in the Alberni Valley are located on Huu-pi-ji-sit and Shot First Nation territories, and to not only recognize that fact, but to appreciate it as well, especially given how things have been going in the past couple of months. So that being said, we do have a fairly heavy agenda in front of us today. I'm wondering if there are any items to be added or subtracted from the agenda, or if there are any materials that we may have gotten late. Is there anything like that? Dr. Shannon?
Thank you. I did just notice an email from Alex Dyer regarding a late correspondence item.
Yes. Wendy, did you want to cover that off?
Yes, so there were some photos submitted. So Alex Dyer has emailed them out, and it's respecting petition delegation Heather Powell, Holly's Executive Golf Course, TUP, temporary use permit 2005.
Okay.
So those will also be uploaded to the website for the public's viewing.
Okay. Thank you for that. So we will have that on the website and available there. Are there any other items or items to discuss? If not, we can make a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. Are you moving the agenda, Director Roberts? Thank you. And seconded by Director Cole. Any further comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Okay, well, that brings us to item 3, which is declarations, either conflicts of interest or perceived conflicts of interest, or gifts exceeding $250. Does anyone have any declarations to make? I'm just going to check. I don't think I do. Nope. Okay, moving on to the next item. We have the adoption of minutes. There's only one piece, and that's the Board of Directors meeting minutes for June 9th, 2021.
Move adoption of the minutes, Chair.
Thank you, Director Coots. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Roberts. Any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, so that brings us to petitions, delegations, and presentations. Normally, we have a 10-minute time limit for presentations and delegations. If you're getting close, though, we'll probably just I'll let that slide. But if it doesn't look like you're very close to the end after that 10 minutes, I'll interrupt and ask the board if we want to continue. That 10 minutes, however, does not include questions and answers afterwards. So you can rest easy there. First up is we have Jenny with an introduction of a new individual. If you wanted to go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's my pleasure to introduce Paulo Eichelberger, who is joining us as our new solid waste manager. He comes from the Peace River Regional District, where he was the general manager of environmental services. He has over 15 years of experience in the environmental field, with a significant portion in solid waste landfill management. He's a certified manager of landfill operations, and he is going to be an excellent fit with the team. We're very excited to have him. So in that way, I would like to invite you all to welcome him to the regional district.
Okay. Welcome. If you have any words, please go ahead, Paulo.
Thanks, everybody. Good to, I guess, meet. I'm using air quotes right now, but good to meet everybody out there. Hope to see everybody in person. I've been kind of joking with folks that I've been basically drinking from the fire hose since I got in. So lots of information, meet new people, getting to understand the team. So I'm looking forward to getting underway here, kind of thing. And we're kind of in that phase. We're setting up our family in our new spot, which is now down here, closer to some other family members. So looking forward to all of it.
Great. And on behalf of the board, I'd like to welcome you to the fold, and hopefully you just get used to the fire hose, because it doesn't really stop ever. Okay, well,
Awesome.
thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right. All right. Okay, we'll move on to the next item. And that brings us to Inspector Eric Rochette, the OIC for the Port Alberni detachment. And he has a presentation regarding, I think, body-worn cameras. Oh, thank you and welcome. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I just want to make sure I forwarded documentation maybe 2 weeks ago to the district. So I'm hoping you had a chance to have a look at some of the documentation I forwarded. The day I sent the email is basically the day I received the information myself. So I had a quick look at body-worn cameras, expectations, rollout, and I'll briefly talk about it, and then I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. Obviously, there's still a lot of unanswered questions as to the way it's going to roll out, but the point of this is there's a working group in place at district, and they're meeting again July 7th. So if there's any questions or concerns that are raised during this meeting, and I've reached out to other community leaders and stakeholders, I will forward all those questions or concerns to that group, and then they can address them or make any modification on the plan. But I'm just going to go in general terms here, as you saw in the material I forwarded. So the body-worn cameras, obviously, it's been discussed for a few years. It's been used in the States for sure for a few years, as well as in Europe. They had a pilot project and what we call V Division for us. So basically in Nunavut, Iqaluit, had 20 officers that worked with the body-worn cameras for a certain amount of time. And I guess the project went well. And now the plan is to do a phased approach. So they want to roll out the body-worn cameras in the fall of 2021. It's going to be done over a 18-month period. I received an email the last few days in regards to the rollout, and fall 2021 is still in place. That's still the objective. Now, as far as the rollout is, they're going to focus on different type of detachments. So one detachment will be like a urban detachment, probably like a lower mainland type of detachment. Then they're going to go with one detachment, probably North District, a smaller detachment, as well as a rural detachment. And then from that point on, they're just going to learn from members and from mistakes and go from there. There's one point that I need to emphasize is as far as, because usually the question's all about costs. They mentioned $2,000 to $3,000 per camera per year. Cameras will be provided to all frontline members, which means members that deal with the public on a regular basis. So detachment like Port Alberni, all the general duty members will eventually have cameras, and maybe some of the support staff as well. But they're going to emphasize on frontline members at first. There's multiple reasons, obviously, for body-worn cameras. It's about police accountability. It's about rebuilding the public trust and what we do, as well as it's going to help quite a bit to deal with public complaints against officers, to dismiss them or support them one way or the other, as well as it's going to help quite a bit with cases going to courts. If you look at some of the data, obviously there's some few departments that have started to wear body-worn cameras in Canada, and they've seen a decrease in time in court for officers, a decrease in use of force by officers, as well as decrease of conflict between police officers and the public. Generally speaking, I guess if you know you've been recorded, everybody tends to behave a little bit nicer to each other. We're not, like, as far as the biggest hurdle that we're going to have to face when we come to body-worn camera is as far as retention of data. So my understanding is right now is the officer will be able to turn the camera on and off. The public may request that the camera be turned off, and it's going to be up to the officer to make a decision at the time, looking at circumstances of the requests, if there's some privacy issues, as well as the officer will be asked to, will tell the public when the camera is on, and it's visually, the public will be able to see. There'll be a green light that will be flashing, and so the public will know that it's recording. It's audio and video recorded. And my understanding is quite sensitive as far as sound, so you'll be able to clearly hear the officer, the person's having a conversation with, as well as the public in the background as well, if there's any conversation there. And so the material also going to be managed under a digital evidence management system, which, as far as we've been told, it's going to be like a cloud system where all the data will be stored. As far as retention, we're going to have to follow the rules the same as we do with all the paperwork, all about the files. It's guided to Government of Canada. And so the minimum retention period, if there's anything valid related to a crime, it'll be minimum 2 years. And depending on the crimes, it goes from 2 years to 20 years to 25 years, depending on the severity of the incident being recorded. If there's absolutely nothing of value, my understanding is the recording can be deleted. Now, how is it going to be done? I'm not sure. And this is still under discussion. When we talk about the cost, I mentioned $2,000 to $3,000 per camera. I know that the Government of Canada has approved a rollout for $238 million over 6 years. So the government will, municipalities or a province won't have to pay until 2024-25. Now, when it's going to be time to, as far as how much the municipalities, a regional district, or province will have to pay, this is still under negotiation or discussion. So I really don't have any numbers when it comes to that. And the other aspect of it is too, there's going to be a lot of challenge when it's going to come to disclosure of items recorded. I know that the public will have access to the information, just like they do now to the Access to Information Program or the Information Act. So if you know you've been recorded and you want to have access to the data that were recorded and saved by the RCMP, you're just gonna have to go on a RCMP website and put your request in. Right now, the turnaround bylaw has to be 30 days to provide the information requested. Obviously, with this body-worn cameras, I think it's probably going to be difficult to maintain the 30 days, but that seems to be the plan as of right now. As far as training for the officers, when they did a pilot project in Nunavut and Iqaluit, it was basically 8 hours of training. 4 hours were provided by the vendor and 4 hours were provided by the RCMP. And it just went over basically the usage of the camera, the maintenance of the camera. The other thing too, I think one of the reasons why they decided to test the cameras up north is just the weather impact as well, the cold, the rain, snow, see the quality of the recording. I've never had a chance to see a recording what it looks like and the quality. My understanding it's great quality, and as well as for audio. There'll be, as far as like I mentioned, a digital evidence management system. Like I mentioned, the iCloud, it's still being debated exactly how they're going to do it because they have to conform with obviously security laws in Canada as far as privacy access. We want to make sure that public will not be able to somehow hack their way into the iCloud and access the information. So that's something they're working on. That's basically the basic information that I have right now in regards to body-worn cameras. We're going to know more after the meeting in mid-July as far as our rollout. I know that I mentioned to my members here, like I'm a obviously strong proponent. So if they ask for volunteers or detachment, I would want to be in the forefront of that. I'll raise my hand for sure. I would assume that let's say we get chosen, they'll send us probably 5-10 cameras, and then we go from there. I'm not sure of the impact as far as like IT support that will be provided by the vendor, or if the RCMP will have to provide IT support. Or right now we have an IT support person from the city of Port Alberni. What would be the impact as far as like obtaining training and support from that person? So is that going to increase the workload quite a bit? And we may have to look at that because that person will only work part-time with us here and the rest of the time with the city. So that's all things we're going to have to look at in the next 6 months to a year and see where we're at. And obviously, if you're not selected as far as for the first phase, we'll see what's going to transpire. And as soon as I know more, when Port Alberni is selected to get the first cameras, I'll get in touch with all the stakeholders and government officials, and so they're well aware of what's going on and what's going to be happening. And as far as once I know more about cost, because I know cost is always a big issue, when we can in position to narrow down the cost per cameras and how many cameras we're going to have, I'll share those numbers with all of you, and then we can have a conversation in regards to that. So I'm not sure if I'm sure there's plenty of questions. So.
Yes, thank you. And right on time as well. So are there any comments or questions? Okay, I have Directors Cote, Roberts, and then Bodner.
Thank you. So through the chair, thank you. Can't remember what your position is.
Just call me Eric.
Okay, sorry. Thank you, Eric. Just wondered if the cameras are going to be used for anything beyond just recording. If there's going to be like things like face recognition or tools that the RCMP are going to be able to use with these cameras. Thanks.
So as far as facial recognition, I'm not sure, to tell you the truth. I see there's a comment in regards to that. It's going to be image, video, and sound, and as well as obviously it's going to be time dated and everything. But the other aspect to I need to, people need to be aware of. It's a tool that we won't be allowed to use for surveillance. Like it's going to be overt. People that we deal with will be well aware that there's a camera and you're being recorded. And I think that's always a lot of concerns that is that going to be done covert? Are you going to try to hide the camera? No, like it's going to be made quite clear to the public and to the officers. The camera is going to be on your chest, basically on your bulletproof vest, and the public will be able to see when it's recording. But as far as facial recognition, I can't really comment on that. I'm not aware of anything.
Thank you. I have Director Roberts and then Director Bodner.
Well, thank you for that. Through the chair to Eric. What is the routing for body cameras once the video is taken? Does it, I know you said to the cloud, but does it go into a monitor or backup in the vehicle, or do they have to unload it once you get back to the station?
Yeah, so I don't have an answer to that question, and that's one of the questions I have for the working group, is because now if an IT person has to download the camera to an external drive at the office, it's going to be done by the IT support, it's going to be done by the officers. So there's a lot of extra steps there, and which is extra time. But I'm not sure exactly how it's going to work.
Given the prices involved in the cameras, I wouldn't be surprised that they automatically upload via cell phone network and just some pre-approved plan with the providers. But that's remains to be seen, I suppose.
Yeah, so we have, like, in some of our police cars, they have what they call WatchGuard, which is recording interaction from the police vehicle when we pull someone over. It's connected with the emergency lights equipment, and certain detachment, they were able to set it up like it's as soon as you drive into the parking lot, it downloads right away. Here we weren't able to do that, so we have to do a USB and do upload and download, and then do it to a monitor, a computer in the office. So I think it's going to be as well as the situation of your detachment, and so this is all up in the air as far as I know.
Thank you for that. Next up, I have Director Bodner.
Thank you. That's quite interesting, Eric. What I wanted to know if this has ever been used in other parts of the country or in other areas, and what were the pros and cons found out by using it?
So the few like documentation I've read, there's been a few departments in Canada, really small numbers of cameras still being used. And there's a police department in Ontario, which I don't have the name in front of me here, but what I've noticed is, and it's kind of in line with what I guess has been observed probably in the States and in Europe, is a reduction of use of force by officer, exchange between public and officers are way more respectful, conflict are resolved quicker, so less time for officers at scenes to dealing with situations, and as well as it's been well received in court as far as providing evidence. So what I've noticed is a fairly decent increase in people pleading guilty, because what officers have and what I've read is sometimes it's really hard to transfer what occurred, what you saw on papers, and then now with that body camera you just play a video and makes it quite easier. And it's kind of really streamlined the process for the court system, which is good news for both parties, right? The courts are quite overwhelmed, and officers do spend a lot of time in court. And if you can streamline approval of charges or dismissal of charges, that's great. And what they notice is it's just been streamlining the process in general. So those are the 3-4 points that they've noticed. It's obviously in a small scale, right? Like in Canada, it's been quite limited as far as the usage of body-worn cameras at this point. And so we'll see in the next few months or years.
Okay, thank you for that. It's not a piece of equipment to carry around.
Yes, that's one more. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. I have Director Paulson next.
Inspector O'Shea, thank you for your presentation. And I guess probably of interest to all of us that are elected officials. Maybe you could re-clarify for me who will bear the initial cost of the cameras. I did read where the annual maintenance and keeping of the cameras, which is anywhere between $3,000 and $5,000 a year, will fall onto the local budgets. And the second part of my question is, in a detachment like ours, that annual thing would probably roll out to about $70,000 to $100,000 a year. Are we concerned when it comes time to make the hard budget decisions that we may have to, or the RCMP may be subjected to one or two officer cutbacks in a detachment? I know that's a decision that's made at these kind of board levels, but anyway, initial rollout, yearly costs, and just concerns about how those yearly costs are going to be paid.
So like I can, basically the funding, I have a paragraph that kind of covers your first part of your question here. What will it be funded by contract partners, which is like the City of Port Alberni or the regional district? And it hasn't been finalized, but the RCMP will finalize multi-year financial plans for BWC implementation. However, BWC funding would not require contracting partners to pay until 24-25, allowing 3 years to plan for this pressure. So now, so obviously, if you look at detachment like here, frontline policing, probably need approximately 30 cameras. Obviously, that's split in funding, right? So proportion-wise, out of 35, probably 28 will be city and 7 or 8 will be provincial. Like, obviously, I'm just throwing numbers to approximate right now. And so there'll be no cost for the first 3 years. So the purchase of the cameras will be all paid by this $238 million funding approved by Government of Canada in 2020. Now, obviously, once we hit 24-25, there'll be the maintenance of those cameras. So if we look at 35 cameras multiplied by 3,000, it comes to your numbers. Now, yes, so with different municipalities or regional district, there'll be some conversation going to be required as far as like funding. What would be the impact of that? In a big scheme of thing, the number is up there, but it's not extreme. And I think that's what they're trying to really maintain. But I'm cautious because that 2,000 to 3,000 number is just an estimate. Like I said, they haven't identified a vendor yet. So it's going to depend on the contract and the kind of negotiation that will occur with that. So those are the numbers they've asked us to use at this point. And I like to think we'll be pretty close, but we know things can change drastically in the next 3 to 4 years. But I think the front loading of the process, it appears that the Government of Canada will pay for the purchase and, the first, even the IT support and all that. And I'm assuming a lot of support will be provided by the vendor. It should be part of the contract. But again, that's my expectation. I'm not sure if it will be part of the contract at the end of the day. So I don't know if you answered your questions. Okay.
Okay. Thank you for that. Are there any further questions or comments? Dr. Nab, please go ahead.
Yes, I was a comment. Listening to the presentation, it appears that there might be a cost saving in court time and overtime with the cameras if we achieve more guilty pleas prior to them actually going to court. So I guess that's something within the next couple of years we'll actually be able to find out before it actually comes on to the tax rolls, to be able to look to see if we can budget less court time and overtime simply because of the use of the cameras. Is that something you expect?
Yeah, from what I've read so far, absolutely. They mentioned, I think, a 77% reduction of court time for officers. So that is a huge impact. An officer, you go to court, you get 4 hours, and a lot of time you spend a full day there, so 8-9 hours. If you reduce that by 77%, that is, it would cover the cost. for sure.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none. On behalf of the board, I'd like to, oh, Director Cote, please go ahead.
Trying to unmute. Thank you. A question that's not related to the body worn cameras, but just a question around this summer and connection with the Sprout Lake Marine Patrol. I just want to make sure that the RCMP are aware that the Sprout Lake Marine Patrol are working this year out at the Sprout Lake Provincial Park. And I'd really like to see that connection strong. Thank you.
No, thank you. I made a note of it. I made a note last time, but I'll make sure that to reinforce that with, we're just in the process of organizing lake patrols right now. So once we have specific dates, I'll make sure that the officers involved do get in touch with the Marine Patrol ahead of time and try to work some kind of a, maybe work together when they go out.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Oh, and on behalf of the board, I'd like to thank you for your presentation. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you again, Eric. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
All right. Thank you, Inspector Rochette. That brings us now to the third item in presentations and delegations. I'd like to welcome Heather Powell from the Hollies Executive Golf Course regarding the temporary use permit application. If you wanted to go right ahead. Thank you and welcome.
Okay. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing me the chance to present at your board meeting. I understand that because of my lack of communication and lack of providing information to the board and the ACRD, that there's possibilities of mistrust and misunderstanding in regards to the RV park and the Hollies Executive Golf. I just wanted to give everybody a brief history about myself and our company, and basically let everybody know that we have actually been in the RV business since 2005, and we currently run 2 other RV resort parks. During this time, we've watched a massive transition that's taken place in our industry between the weekend warrior RVer and the full-time RVer to now like the full-time living RVer. During this time, the use of the RV, even though it wasn't the original manufacturer's intended use, has significantly changed to full-time living. And I wouldn't be far off if I was to say probably 80% of the RVs that are now purchased are done so for the sole purpose of full-time RV living. The actual use of the RVs as homes, accommodation, temporary or long-term, has grown so exponentially that even insurance industry has had to make changes. They now offer insurance policies that are homeowner insurance policies. And so as long as an RV is actually skirted in, an RV insurance policy can be converted to a homeowner's insurance policy instead of just an ICBC travel type insurance policy. Just for some information, I realized that because the actual use of an RV and the intended use of an RV, that there's some conflict there. As far as, our perceptions, as far as, municipalities and local government, it causes a collision basically between the intended use of an RV and an actual use. But from the practical standpoint of owning an RV park, the mechanical needs of like an RV, as in the sewer, the water, and the power, the basic 3 things that are required for us to provide service to a traveling RV or an extended stay RV, are exactly the same. Because these RVs are basically compact, tiny homes, and they now have combination washers and dryers built right in. They're environmentally friendly. They use very, very little water, and they can pretty well run a complete household on between 30 and 50 amps of power. I realize that, you know, because of the challenges with RVs now, we've got, and accommodations like housing is such a massive concern throughout our society. And I think it's important that we need to kind of separate the types of RV living that there is. So there are a lot of people that live in parked cars, vans, old motorhomes, and old RVs. They park these RVs and vans and cars all over our beautiful island in, you know, every little nook and cranny that they can, because they have no place to go. The challenge that we have as a society with this, though, is that a lot of those people unfortunately have expired propane tanks. There's no washroom facilities in, you know, cars and trucks, and they have fires to cook food in areas that aren't designated for fires in all summer, winter, it doesn't matter. They leave garbage behind, unfortunately, and a lot of solid waste can be left behind as well. But that's a social housing crisis that we have, and I know we've all identified, and I kudos to the board for the amount of work that everybody's done in our local area in regards to housing. But we also have two other types of RVers. We have working professionals that are living in their RVs while taking contracts at different locations. And of those parts, I would say 90% of the people that we've had house over the last 3 and a bit years, they've been forestry workers, engineers, mechanics, welders. We've had a few young couples that have relocated for work, but they couldn't find homes. We've had, and we currently have, we have the Nations staying with us in several of our RV sites as well. And then we have another group of people that stay with us, and that's like the retired RVers that they decided to sell their home and permanently live in their RV. Or they're also retired and they sold their home, and due to our housing crisis, they haven't been able to purchase a new RV, a new home at this time. So our demographic is either retired, semi-retired, or it's more of the working professional. And that means that we have a really low volume of people in the park. So most RVs that we have only house one person or 2 people. And again, this cuts down on the amount of services that everybody uses. And just so that I can talk about a little bit about us very specifically at Holly's. So for us, we require that all guests have a full service RV. We don't allow tenting on any of our sites. We don't allow anybody that doesn't have their own facilities in their RV. And we only accept a certain age of RV. We don't allow anything that's older than 10 years. And we do that for the safety of our guests so that we know for sure that all the propane is up to date, and it doesn't need to be recertified, and we don't have to be checking in on people constantly for that recertification. We also require proof of insurance. We require proper water and sewer connections to all of our services as well. Our guests are not allowed to have any open wood burning fires. They're allowed propane fires only. We have quiet times, like our latest loud time that isn't very loud is 10 p.m. And because our guests are not transient in nature, we have a very low traffic in and out of our site. Our sites are large, they're 27 feet wide and can fit about a 40 to 42 foot RV at the height of the largest size that they have. And the RV sites themselves are about 60 feet long. When we first arrived at the Holly's Golf Course, the golf course itself had not really, I'm trying to think of a diplomatic way, we had to do a lot of upgrades. So we did significant upgrades to 2 main parts of our service, one being our infrastructure for our power. So we built 2 brand new 600 amp services which were properly permitted with our local electrical contractors. And we also built 2 brand new septic fields to deal with the septic pit that they had that they were running the restaurant side of things and the original golf course after. So the adequacy of the existing system was not adequate to even have just even a household there. Those 2 facilities have been upgraded to our current standards prior to any of our use of RV sites or even the use of the clubhouse itself. Let me see, septic. I would just like to kind of, I think one of the other things, sorry, that I should bring up is, and that's one of the reasons why I sent everybody, I sent pictures to everyone to have a look at, is I wanted you to have a look and notice that there's very easy access in and out of our site that doesn't go right onto the main highway. The old highway that used to be there kind of wraps right in front of one side of the RV park. So it's very easy in times of heavy traffic for the RVs to get access in and out of the park. And basically there's 3 entrances and 3 exits into the park, although we prefer everybody to enter at one end and come out the other end. Also on that picture, because you can see the distance and the space between all the roads that we put in and the road that is existing, and where the fire hydrant is right on the edge of our property for fire services, for fire trucks. If we can get 40 and 60-foot RVs easily access in through and out of the RV park, they can back in. They have lots of room to manipulate their RV units, whether they be a solid 40-foot motorhome, or if they're like a big truck and camper unit. There's lots of manipulation for those units to be able to turn around and have access and egress into and out of our site. I think at this time, the only other things that I'd like to say before opening up to questioning is that I would like to ask today for a grace period to allow for the rezoning process to occur on this parcel. As part of the grace period, like I understand that that we can certainly provide the copies of all of the permits that we have taken out for electrical as well as septic. We will just get those permits from the authorities, and we can provide those to everybody so that they understand that we have spent a significant amount of expense in making sure that everybody was safe and things were done properly. And it's not a camp where we're running electrical cords all over the place. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for that. Does anyone have any comments or questions? Director McNabb, please go ahead.
So I understand the original temporary use permit was for 22 sites. How did we end up at 30?
There isn't 30 sites. And I'd just like to clarify that there are only 28 sites. I did have my RV parked there beside the clubhouse, but there is only 28 sites. But having said that, that is 6 more sites than were originally asked for in the permit. And the reason why that happened was we were actually just trying to help out people in the local area that were desperate for a place to be. We had put in a 600 amp service to either do a greenhouse style operation there or build a shop, because the buildings were very old, like on that side of the property. And we wanted to upgrade the power anyways. And as it happened, we just had such a large demand for people needing places to stay. And given the challenges that everybody's had with the COVID and with accommodations, we just went ahead and built 6 more sites.
So the original design was for 22 sites.
Yeah.
Was that the design of the septic system? as well?
No, because there were two septic systems that we put in. So we put in one septic system that was handling the 22 sites, and then we built another septic system, and it's additional filing for 10 RV sites, as well as a 77-seat pub, right, and the clubhouse. So one of the things, so that's been complete. So the clubhouse part, and as well as the 10 sites, when we did put the filing in, it was for both. So there's two separate septic filings, one to deal with the original one, and then one, the additional. And I'd just like to say, since we haven't ever, when we've owned the property, we've never ever run like the 70-seat pub part, because shortly thereafter, of course, I think it was a year in, is when COVID kind of happened and shut everything down. So we never really operated the capacity of septic of what 77 chairs would look like in a, that we have the permit for through the liquor board. Does that make sense?
So before we continue, I'm wondering, I'm just going to run to the washroom. Director Matt.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now I'm chair.
Yeah.
So the other question that I had, and just won't be able to get out of anything else, is whether or not there are showers and laundry facilities on site. Is there a unit for that?
No. And the reason is that each and every one of the units is fully self-contained. It's a requirement of staying at the park. So every single RV has its own shower system and its own washroom facilities. In the clubhouse has washrooms, like toilet facilities, but no showers. But everybody's unit that is there on site has its own bathroom facilities. Some of the units have their own, they're like a single little washer and dryer. Some of the bigger ones, they have their own washer and dryer in there. And it's like very small, like you can put 2 sheets in there and that's it. And they're very highly efficient, and they're inside the RV itself. And they use very, very little water. We did not put in or even request to put in a laundry facility, because Port Alberni does have several good clothing laundry facilities already available. And we didn't want to put additional stress on the septic systems if we didn't need to provide that service to our guests.
Okay, I'm more worried about the standard that's applicable to sites like this. So, we'll deal with that later. Has anybody else got any other questions? Yes, Director Paulson.
Thanks for presenting today, Heather. And I'm a city councillor, so I really don't have a vote on your topic today. But just for my education, each unit or vehicle will have a VIN number and a category code. And there are categories that actually it's illegal to take up permanent residence in. I wonder if you could give me just maybe an overview of those categories and how they may or may not apply in your situation. It may be length and width and size and how they're built and stuff, but I'm not conversant in that, and I would hope maybe you are.
In answer to your question, there are 2 types of, and I don't know about what you're meaning, who's making it illegal or not. So I'll just ask you that question back in a moment. But to answer your question as far as rules go, there is a Z240, which is under the Manufacturers Home Act, which is what your mobile home is. And they're built to a housing type of standard. Then there's a Z241. A Z241 is what they would call a recreational RV trailer or a temporary trailer. They're built to a slightly different standard. Do they have all the same facilities in them? Absolutely, yes. So they have all the same washroom facilities. They have all the same propane requirements for safety. They have all of those things. But one of the main differences between a Z240 and a Z241 is going to be your insulation factor on your walls. So, but other than that, like the bathroom part, so all of your plumbing in those units is going to be to the same type of codes, as well as your propane requirements and your electrical. So all of those types of things, they can't put a person into whether they are, you know, if you're just staying in there one night, well, you could live in your home one night and have a fire too, right? So those specific standards in regards to safety are the same. But what I do know is that insurance-wise, so the insurance companies like across Canada, if you walk into any one of our insurance companies, they will insure a Z241, which is your standard travel trailer, as a homeowner's insurance policy, as long as it's skirted in. So if it's skirted, and that skirting can be debatable of how it's skirted even. You can use a fabric skirting and you can still be considered skirted in. And that allows you to have a total homeowner's policy as opposed to having a traveling like ICBC type of insurance policy. So when you say the illegal piece, I'm not sure if that it's from the municipal standpoint, and I'm talking municipalities across the board, or whether it was at one time through an insurance standpoint of whether like the intended use and the actual use, blurred lines, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And so I'm not sure where the legality and the illegality of that ends.
My understanding was there were federal and provincial regulations around this. I doubt very much that they're enforced or heavily enforced, but my understanding is there are certain vehicles that you just plain and simple cannot take up permanent 365-day-a-year residency in. I notice in your place, most of your vehicles are the larger. Some of those vehicles are probably $250,000 vehicles, but I just, when I became aware of that, I just wasn't sure where the category wasn't sure where the category is actually stamped on the recreation vehicle, and it's probably on the VIN number with the serial number and stuff. But my understanding is there are vehicles that by law are not to be occupied 365 days a year as a permanent residence. They're strictly recreational vehicles, but I could be totally wrong in it. That's secondhand information, but I thank you for your explanation.
Yeah.
Okay, the next one is Cal Roberts, or Director Roberts, and then we got Director Bodner, and then I'll give it back to the Chair Jack and Director Cody.
Thanks for that. Through the chair to Heather. So I appreciate everything that you're saying, that you've, done all this work on there, and you, during the course of all this, you allowed your temporary use permit to fail, to expire. So what's your rationale for not pursuing that further? And I don't know if there's any other comment there from Mr. Dyer or Mr. Erg on that issue as to where we're at now. Thank you.
For my response in that, it was surely, it expired at a time when at the height of COVID was happening, and it lapsed, and I wasn't paying attention to the actual where my 3-year date was, and it was not through any other reason that I intentionally had it lapse. I had every full intention when I initially got that permit was to apply for proper rezoning process, which I understand that the ACRD is in the process right now of amending their OCP. And I would like to be a part of that now and apply for a proper rezoning of the property to allow for more RV sites than are there, not excessively more, but a few more RV sites, and bring the whole property into compliance for for what the use is. Because it is something that we need in our local area. There are very few RV sites. There are very few campgrounds. And if you have a look, like at any time, I know you guys have all driven by the Walmart parking lot and seen RVs parked there in the summer, and people staying overnight there and people living in their RVs, and they just move them from parking lot to parking lot to parking lot. And I don't know if the board is aware that those kinds of things are going on just because of the shortage. You know, that the Travel Lodge just up the road from me, they put in an additional bunch of sites last year. I think they were finished in October, November, and they were full by December 1st. And for ourselves, we have, probably a 50-person wait list for RV sites. And it's nice RVs, like we're talking resort vehicle RV sites. So we're talking for, professional people that are coming in and out of our area. We're talking about retired people that have made changes. But regardless, it was my lapse in, paying attention to where I was at of the 3-year permit. And that's what has caused, I know, a lot of the concern here. And all I can do is apologize for that and hopefully move forward with a new application to extend an RV park in an area where I think it has the least amount of environmental impact. It's a great piece of property for an RV park because we have the recreation right there. We don't have to build any additional buildings. The building that is there can be easily renovated to outfit, like a larger RV park. With having the opportunity to move it into a real RV park and getting the proper zoning, at that point, it makes sense to move forward and be able to, spend more money on, landscaping, proper paving through, and just, making it like that next step of what an RV resort should look like.
Thank you for that. If we could keep our answers pretty concise as well as our questions, that would be great. We're moving into Director Bodner, Director Cote. Did I see Director Shannon as well? No? Yeah? Okay. So Director Bodner, please go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you for being here, Heather, because there are a lot of things that are my concern, but I'm going to keep it short. One of the things I'm going to ask about is the insurance. How many units are you insured for that would be skirted in?
I don't have to be specifically insured for a unit because the units all carry their own insurance.
Okay.
So each and every RV, and what I mentioned earlier is that we require and we check on every single person to make sure that they are insured every single year on an annual basis. So that's part of one of the things that we do. But I carry for the company myself, we carry over $5 million in liability insurance for the property itself.
Okay, thank you. And one more question is, you have been in business, the recreational business here of the RVs for 16 years now? Would that be correct?
Yeah.
So would it be fair to say that you would be aware of the legal implications such as permits and whatnot? Because of your business, this must have come up in other business, in other times that you've had to deal with RVs?
Aware of permits.
Yeah.
Yeah, the ones that we've done for electrical and septic and for the Hollies Park. Yes, I'm aware of those permits.
Okay, that's fine. That's it. Thank you, Heather.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks. I have Director Cote and then Director Shannon. Please go ahead.
Oh, thank you. A couple of questions regarding your temporary use permit that you have let lapse. So that was a temporary use permit for short-term vacation rental RVs?
I don't believe it was, I don't have it right in front of me, the exact wording on that. But it was, I think it did say recreational use on there for sure. Yeah.
I'd like staff to answer that, please. So what you have in place or had in place was a temporary use. So if staff could answer that, I'd like a follow-up question, please.
Is that okay, Mr. Chair? Yeah, so one of the conditions of the permit was this permit is issued for a seasonal campground for a maximum of 22 camping sites.
So seasonal would be any time of the year, am I correct on that? Or how would you determine seasonal?
Yeah, so it didn't specify or limit a time of year, but it was intended to be a seasonal commercial campground, so certainly implies not a permanent residence.
Okay, thank you. So I'm sure that things changed then from a seasonal campsite. So if I had an RV and I wanted to go stay at a campsite, I would be paying probably by the day or by the week. Am I correct?
Yeah, not necessarily though. So sometimes you would maybe pay for 6 months at a time, or you maybe pay 30 days at a time. So when we do out, when we write a receipt out for somebody, they say how long they want to stay with us, and we give them a daily rate, and we give them a lower daily rate if they stay longer with us, and we charge them GST on that. And if they stay with a shorter term with us, then we charge them like a higher daily rate, and we still charge them the GST.
So a question, did you change that? Did you start out with your development in that manner, or did it change when you took it upon yourself to say that COVID and the lack of housing, you needed to become a different rather than seasonal rental and change your the way that you charged people?
No, not at all. Not at all. And at the other parks that we have as well, we have that same policy in place. So, and maybe this is the challenge. Okay, so we build the facilities so that the facilities can be used all day, every day, regardless of who's in there. So say you came and camped one night and then you left, and then the next person came and camped one night and they left, and then somebody came in for a month and they stayed with us for a month and then they left. All the facilities that we build have been built and everything to have like the use of the property used 365 days. But there's seasons of that. So we have, for instance, we'll have people come from the prairies from the spring until the fall. And that's their season. They'll come and they'll stay for that period of time. Then we have people come to Port Alberni and they stay. And this is at both the RV parks. They come from the fall until the spring and then they leave. And then we have people come and stay while they've got contracts in town, and they will stay for certain periods of time. So what I say, the majority of our business since we opened, and we weren't sure what it was going to look like in Port Alberni as opposed to where we were, because I had anticipated we'd have much more nightly traffic because the people that were staying at the Walmart parking lot would like to come and stay at the RV park. But even when we've had vacant sites in the RV park, we never got the people from the Walmart parking lot, never came and stayed in our sites. And so So as time went on, it just seemed, and with COVID happening, that just made it even worse. And I mean worse but better, but it made it so that even more people just needed like an RV, like a longer RV staying time, if that makes sense. Like we didn't build it so that we couldn't like use it all the time, if that's.
It seems that the use has changed. It's no longer what it was originally developed. The temporary use it was permitted for, so.
Okay.
I do see a need in the valley and the regional district for housing options, but I don't know that RVs are the right option. And this changes the use, so in my opinion, but I do see a need for different options. And I thank you for coming forward and presenting.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think with the final word, question or comment, Director Shannon, if you'd like.
Thank you. Thank you, Heather, for your presentation. I have two questions. One is, so are you looking to renew this TUP and then if it's granted 3 years from then apply for rezoning? Or are you looking for rezoning now?
No, I'm looking for rezoning now. Because like I know I haven't put in an application for that just yet. But one of the things that I had spoken to Mike about when I first found out about us having the meetings, etc., was whether I should put in the application for the rezoning now, and he had mentioned to me that we should maybe wait until we hear from the board in regards to the outcome of the temporary use permit and whether a grace period would be allowed so that I can go through the proper rezoning process. But I would like to do it now so that I can, because it doesn't take much time for me to be able to build RV sites and accommodate people like in a short period of time that the demand is here. So if I could do that, I would love it, because I think that we'd be providing a really good, safe housing option for a lot of people, even if it was temporary.
Okay, thank you for that. Just because later on in our agenda, my understanding is looking for a renewal of the TUP. And then I guess my next question is if it's a renewal of this temporary use permit or rezoning, the limit, and maybe this is a question for Mike when we get to that agenda item, but if it's a renewal, it would still be at those 22 units. And you said you currently have 28 sites.
Yeah, so I have 26 extra units. That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, on behalf of the board, I'd like to thank you for your presentation and the comments that you've been given and the questions that have been asked and answered. And yeah, yours is the first one up when we get to planning. So if you'd like to stick around and watch, please go ahead.
Great. Thank you so much for your time, everyone. Have a lovely day.
Okay, so next up under item 6 is correspondence for action. This is a request for a letter of support from the Beaver Creek Community Club. So I'm wondering, Dr. McNabb, did you just want to move it, or did you want an overview first, or any comments or questions? You're muted though, sorry.
Sorry, it's the Beaver Creek Hall in Beaufort, so we'll let Director Shannon attack it.
Oh, I keep forgetting. My apologies. Okay, go ahead.
Could they get funding to change the name?
We could try that and see what happens. There might be a little uproar. But no, I will speak to this. Our staff member, Tricia, had actually forwarded to me a grant opportunity that the hall might have been eligible for. So the hall has been busy working away, getting a grant application together for the Canada Healthy Communities Initiative. They're doing a second intake right now. for kind of COVID relief and improving outdoor spaces and improvements for the community. So the hall would like to, on part of the 7-acre property that it sits on, is put in a trail, like kind of in one of the forested areas that's wide enough to accommodate strollers, wheelchairs, have it wheelchair accessible, and do some more upgrades to some of the lawn area and more wheelchair accessibility down to the park and the playground and the new basketball court. So as part of the application, they're hoping to attach as an appendix some letters of support. And so I know they've put out this letter to a bunch of different people in the community and organizations. So this one has come to us. So I am happy to move the motion that's in front of us here. But if anybody has any questions, I can try answer them because or staff, Trisha might have more knowledge on it than I do, or Wendy. Thanks.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Bodnar. Does anyone have any comments or questions? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? Oh, all opposed? Motion carried.
Director Jack, I am in favor, but I just, I'm wondering who will be overseeing this project, if it'll be run through the regional district.
Go ahead.
My understanding through the grant is that it is submitted by the Beaver Creek Community Club, and they will be administering all the finances and everything and reporting back through this grant themselves. It won't come through the regional district.
Okay, great. Okay, with the motion carried, that brings us to the next item, which is item 7. Correspondence for information. Would anyone like to pull anything out? Go ahead, Director Shannon.
Thank you. I just wanted to highlight and point out my gratitude to what I thought was a wonderful response from the province regarding our letter in regards to the proposed wolf moratorium or recreational wolf hunt on the island. And it was a very pragmatic response and what I was really hoping for. So I was just really happy to see that response from the province. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I definitely count this as something that really does fit with where we're coming from as a region and does fit with the science. So are there any other items that anyone would like to pull out? Dr. Paulson, please go ahead.
I don't think I need an answer right now on this. This could be something for a future meeting, but under item G, the province of BC, in the letter, there's a fair amount of rhetoric around the social procurement in the future. And I just wonder if maybe in the future, staff could kind of give us an update on our progress on a social procurement policy. And I don't need that answer today.
Okay. I've kept abreast of many of the updates in regards to the SSIP. It's a bit longer than that working group, so we can provide an update. We might even be able to get someone to come in and provide an update as a part of a presentation. But Douglas, if you wanted to fill that in, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With respect to staff resourcing, the financial plan talks about the procurement coordinator joining the ACRD on or around the beginning of September. And so that would be an early project for that position to work with the board on developing a policy that suits the board's initiatives. Thank you.
Great. Are there any other items to be pulled out? Dr. Cote, please go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair to staff, I see that we were denied our COVID-19 resilience infrastructure stream project for the office entrance improvements. Will we be not moving forward with that, or do we have funding that we could make those improvements?
Mr. Chair, we've got some ideas about that we'll be back to the board with in the next, I would say in the next month or two, perhaps, with respect to the whole configuration of the building, et cetera.
Thank you. I'd also like to acknowledge that AVICC is sending our resolution regarding unauthorized camping to UBCM.
Yeah, that's definitely good news. Thank you for that. Okay, last chance. Anything else? Okay, seeing none. Could we have a motion to receive the correspondence for information? Thank you, Director Beckett, seconded by Director Roberts. All in favor? All opposed? Yeah, motion carried. Okay. Okay, that brings us to the 3 requests for decisions and bylaws, first of which is the 2020 Statement of Financial Information. Terry, please take it away.
So this is one of the final pieces of reporting required for 2020, which I'm always excited to get out of the way. So it just includes our audited financial statements, as well as our statement of remuneration for both the directors and staff, as well as for all of our suppliers. So this information, once approved by the board today, will be posted onto our website and submitted to the ministry for approval. And happy to answer any questions.
Are there any comments or questions? Director Paulson, please go ahead.
Terry, just a quick question, and it's the famous question that we ask in all financial reports on page 72. It refers to miscellaneous revenue. Could you maybe give us just an overview or a definition of what that category may or may not be made up of?
Yeah, so that would be interest. We have like lease fees. I'm trying to think, it's kind of the stuff that doesn't fit in the other categories, to be honest. It's if it's not technically considered a sale, such as like your water fees, it would kind of go through that account. So revenue that we can get from other organizations for items. Yeah, I can get you more detail if you want, Director Paulson.
Okay. Any further comments or questions? I think the only thing I want to say is that our expenses were just completely minor this year. That was obvious, but just to see just how little they were, it was pretty crazy. So I think the investments in all the infrastructure material is something that I'd like to see. The sorry, not infrastructure, video infrastructure, that kind of thing. Yeah, I think that was it. Okay. If we don't have any more comments or questions, could we have someone move it? Dr. Roberts, sorry, please go ahead.
Yeah, through the chair, thank you. I'd like to make that recommendation that the Board of Directors approve the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District 2020 Statement of Financial Information, SOFI, including all the statements and schedules.
Great. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Paulson. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. All right. Thanks, Terry. That brings us to the item B, local government update on the current rules for board meetings. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the regional district received an update from Assistant Deputy Minister providing an update to all local governments on the current rules around gatherings and events, and getting towards back to normal operations, in particular board and council meetings as the pandemic eases. So regional district staff recommend, we do have a resolution that we continue to hold board and committee and public hearings until August 26th virtually. But we would like to bring a report back to the next board meeting at the end of July, just on different options for holding hybrid meetings, in-person meetings, and then we have to do some upgrades in the boardroom to accommodate this. So our recommendation is just to have staff come back with more information to the July 28th meeting.
Yeah, I think there's particular attention paid to the audio and presence of directors who may be calling in to the greater group of people. And if there's a way for us to be able to show the not just like some random faraway shot of the whole board, but like either side of the board or something like that?
Yes, and that's what
Yeah.
we're working on, is when
Okay.
a director hits their microphone, that the camera would then zoom into that director. So that's what we're working on. And we're encouraged also to have the ability for some public to attend in person, and we'll still offer several ways for the public to participate as well.
I think that should continue the way it is. And I think, especially given the nature of travel that still exists between the West Coast and the Alberni Valley, there may be, I think there's good incentive to make sure that we have good fidelity, high fidelity, quality conversations between the boardroom and anyone who may be calling in or
Yes.
connecting in. That being said, yeah, you're way ahead of me. I'm going to stop talking now. I'm interested in what you'll come up with, though. Are there any other comments or questions? And if not, if we could have someone move the recommended motion, it seems like it's a good plan. Dr. Beckett, thank you. Seconded by Director Cote. Are there any comments? Nope. Okay, all those. Oh, please go ahead, Dr. Beckett.
Yeah, thank you. I think we've all struggled with COVID for the last 15 months, but there are some positive things that we can apply, lessons learned. And, you know, to your comments, Chair Jack, I think we do need to take a look at hybrid opportunities moving forward. And I use myself as an example. If we have a meeting where the agenda is quite short, or appears to be relatively short, you know, for me, it's a 2.5 hour drive one way. Does it make sense for me to have my community pay that expenses, put me through the 5 hours of travel for 1.5 hour meeting? But if we're going to do that, I agree 100%. We need the technology to support the interaction at the board table for both those present and those that are using some form of electronic means of communication. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Dr. Shannon, go ahead.
Thank you. So my question is, just for clarification, that even once we're past step 4 of the 4-step COVID-19 plan, the province has said that this is going to, the option of doing hybrid meetings is just can continue on once we're back to normal, correct? So putting all this infrastructure in kind of makes sense long term. And following Director Beckett's, I mean, as somebody with young kids, having the option, if I can't make it into a meeting or find a sitter, it's quite welcoming to have this option available to be able to attend the meetings. Thanks.
Yeah, and that's something that's particularly acute for us.
One thing I should note is the minister is working on a new order that will allow regional districts to continue after the pandemic virtual and electronic meetings. So that will require a change to our procedures bylaw. So I will, once that order is in place, be bringing an amendment to our procedures bylaw forward for consideration by the board.
Dr. Beckett, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Director Shannon, as well. I just want to be really clear that I'm a people person. I would rather sit across from my colleagues, and I'm a hugger. So for those who will allow me, I will be hugging like crazy for the first little while until we have different options available. Thank you.
I didn't know that about you. I'm going to hug you now. Dr. Cole?
That's funny. I was just about to concur with Director Beckett that I too I would prefer to sit across, even if it's a bigger table from everyone, but please don't hug me. I'm not that kind of person.
No. Okay. So with that, I think it's wise to have the hybrid model be brought back in, especially given the conversations I've had at UBCM. There are regional districts that are actually much larger than ours, where the travel for directors ends up being considerable. So this sort of thing can actually benefit the taxpayer once we get the infrastructure in place. That I think that's something we need to look at. But with that, we do have a motion in front of us. Could we have someone to move it, please? Thank you, Dr. Cote, seconded by Dr. Johnson. Any further comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Okay, that brings us to meeting requests for the Premier, Cabinet Ministers, and Ministry staff for UBCM.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So at the last meeting, on page 106 and 107 were the identified meeting requests for meetings with ministers and ministry staff in conjunction with the UBCM convention. I should note one change. Director Roberts, the meeting with Ministry of Transportation, he would like that to be to discuss Maggie Forest Service Road instead of just Salmon Beach. So that's one change. And if any other directors have any other meetings they would like us to request, if we could have that today, the deadline is the 30th of June to apply for these meetings.
Okay, Dr. Roberts and then Dr. Steer.
Yeah, thanks for that, Wendy, through the chair. The issue was with regards to the Salmon Beach Road, which is a part of the Barclay Main leading into from Macoa leading to Millstream, or I should say Port Albion. And with regards to the Bamfield Road, I don't know. I think that's been taken care of, but I'm not positive. So maybe Director Beckett can give us some comment on that.
Mr. Chair, certainly you're probably in a better position to comment on the good work that the way it's doing. I would add that yes, Director Roberts, the Bamfield Road looks like it has been resolved. The question that I still think that needs to be addressed, the communications along the road, which is a separate topic, but closely related to safe travel.
Yeah, and that seems like it connects to the Minister Bear meeting as well, quite well. Okay, Dr. McNabb, please go ahead. And I think I missed someone.
So we had an ongoing discussion with regards to uses at allowable uses at the airport. Is that something that we could get a minister's ear about?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, with respect to the airport, that's actually kind of a work in progress with our MLA as well. We're in a stage right now. I've just met to clarify a particular matter that came up at that meeting with the chairs of our region and the CAOs of Qualicum Beach and Campbell River and a couple of elected officials from there with those two MLAs. And so we're going back to collect a bit more information. I've been collecting some information, for example, from the Kitimat-Stikine region this morning to see if there's a broader interest in changing these rules. So I'm not entirely sure that this conversation is ready for UBCM. I think there's more data to collect, and I think there's a willingness to evaluate this, but I'm just not sure that it'd be ready for this fall.
Thank you. Okay, I have Director Steer and then Director Cole up next.
Thank you, Chair Jack. Yeah, as new to the ACRD board and not wanting to overstep might be, because we have the opportunity at the municipalities to meet with ministers. I did have a question maybe for next year moving forward, the appropriateness, for example, from a municipal standpoint. There are some regional issues, though, for example, mental health and addictions, where I have a meeting with a minister, proposed meeting with the minister that regards more regional issues towards these topics. And then the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General related once again to regional issues that I think are of importance. And then the third part of that is, in the past, we've had the ability outside of ministerial to meet with, for example, VHA as a separate or Parliamentary Secretary Rice in the past in terms of some of the tsunami mitigation initiatives, etc. So I'm just wondering maybe just some direction going forward, the appropriateness of bringing those kinds of things forward from a municipality perspective, not wanting to take away any opportunity from any of the electoral directors or of the other nations that might have concerns that I might have the ability to address the municipalities, and just maybe some clarification and direction.
Mr. Chair, if I might comment. So our practice is that we submit these meeting requests, and then when we get notifications of which ones are successful, I do share it with our other local government partners and ask who would like to attend. And then your staff let us know which of your counselors would like to attend. If that is not what you're looking for, we could always look at doing something a bit different next year.
No, I think that would be sufficient. Thank you, Wendy. Some of the ones like around VHA, where a regional conversation specifically around the delivery of healthcare on the West Coast, with AKA a new hospital, might be one that would be more appropriate in the venue of the ACRD rather than specifically the municipality of Tofino. That's kind of the direction I was somewhat going with that one.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Next up, I have Director Cole, and then Director Cote, and then Director Shannon.
Thanks so much. I'm wondering if we could just make a little note that at the staff level for Island Health, that we just thank them for their collaboration on our health center here in Ucluelet, because that will be an ongoing thing. And if that could just be a mention in there, just to thank them. If that's possible, thank you. And then is there an opportunity I see that obviously these are all the ministers and such and Island Health, but in the past, council here has met with BCEHS on different topics, and being that we're rolling out the prototype new staffing model on the island right now, and there are going to be some vast changes and some gaps in service, that having some foresight, that would be something that if we could have their attention to, perhaps we will have some concerns at that point. This is me with my crystal ball, predicting that if we had their ear, and I don't know if we get another opportunity to request to meet with them, or if this would be, if it gets rolled into this.
Could warrant something separate, just given that if it's specific to the changes, but also some of the old problems that still exist despite the changes too. So
it's going to be compounded in the next few months.
Yeah, I don't know. I only vaguely know some of the details, not enough to be confident about it. We should have a wider conversation about it at some point, though, because what works for Fraser Health is not the same as what works for us. So.
Yeah, we did have them delegate to our council at our last regular meeting, to which I recused myself, but it's there on YouTube if anybody wanted to pop in to see their presentation. But it outlines how it will work generally in most places, but not specifically to our areas of concern and our locations. So I believe there'll be lots to talk about by the time we get to these UBCM dates.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this is going to have to take the time, like you said, to figure out whether or not it's actually going to work, given all the other variables that aren't even addressed by this. So I don't know the answer to whether or not we want to have a conversation about it at this point. It sounds like maybe we want to try with staff at the very least, just to get our foot in the door. But I don't know. I can't make an argument to a minister at the moment, even though I think it needs to be made. I don't know.
Yeah, in the past, all we did was meet with the CAO and the three top of BCHS, and they're the ones that actually presented and delegated here, and they're the ones we've met with in a room at UBCM in the past.
So you have already?
Oh yes, the last UBCM we met with them when things were all still up and coming and weren't here yet, and now that they're here, it's a bit of a different tone and tempo.
Wendy, do you have any thoughts? Well,
sorry. If it is at staff level, there is more flexibility closer to the date to request a meeting, or we can submit one now, whatever's the wish of the board. I just know the minister ones, the deadline is definitely the 30th, but staff level, I think right up to just before you can request those, a week before.
I'm fine with waiting until we have a sort of more structure on what the approach is going to be or what the concerns are leading up to it, as long as we're not missing a window to sort of book some of their time now.
Maybe there's time to have a discussion about what specifically we want to talk about, rather than just generally, because we didn't do the work to actually come to talk to Minister Dix about this or whomever, right? So it being specific, but also being specific to the shortcomings of how the regime has changed is something I'd like to get to, because there are shortcomings. I just don't have the data to point at it or the implications for our region. Yeah, anyway, let's maybe put staff in the back pocket at this point and go from there. Maybe the next step is getting more clarification on the rollout, and then we can figure out what it looks like and maybe bring it up next year, if three of you, AVICC and UBCM, because it doesn't address some fundamental concerns I have about emergency services, but that I'm not an expert. I can't make that argument yet. So. Okay, sorry about that, everyone. It's an area of increasing interest to me. I have Dr. Cote next, and then Dr. Shannon.
Thank you. I would like to have a meeting, like a committee of the whole. Every year I keep thinking we should have done this. If we could have a short meeting before UBCM to discuss what we're going to say to the minister or staff, and who's going to be the lead, and do a plan out, because too many times I've showed up at minister's office at the door and everybody's looking at each other going, who's saying what? And it'd be very nice to have everything planned out when we get there, so there is no confusion at all. Mm-hmm. And we're very direct and get our message together. So I would ask that staff arrange a meeting before UBCM to discuss resolutions and appointments that we are bringing forward.
Mr. Chair, we do actually staff do have to provide background information for all meetings. So we prepare speaking notes and who the speaker is going to be. We do that as a practice now. But if the board still would like to have a meeting as well, we could do that. But we do provide all the directors attending with who will speak and the topic and the background.
Okay.
Thank you for that. It has been confusing though at times when we go there, and either the speaker doesn't show up or things change. People show up and didn't realize that they were the speaker. So just like to be on top of it. Thanks.
Great. Okay, that brings us to Dr. Shannon.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you to all of you, because I couldn't be here for our last board meeting, but for including a meeting with Minister Popham and the insurance issues for farming that I know my alternate brought forward. And the Agriculture Development Committee is aware that this is kind of coming through and happy to support anyway. So just to thank you.
Alrighty. With that, oh, sorry, Dr. Steer, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Jack. I did have a quick follow-up as I was going, and it was just a question maybe for Wendy again. In terms of the that I see with the Honorable Mike Farnworth, there was a specific one here, and I have one requested for the minister as well. And I'm wondering, and this is a kind of a selfish question, if my ministerial meeting doesn't get approved, would it be possible to add one of the topic items in there if it does come forward? If you guys are successful in that ministerial meeting, if I would be able to add a topic item underneath there. I know they allow up to 3, I believe. Has been historically correct.
Yes, we have done that before when one of the municipalities has not been successful, or we haven't tagging on another topic.
So would this be the appropriate time, or could I just email you, or what should I bring that?
Would you like to add it now, or yeah?
If I could, yeah. It's basically it has to do with some of the potential policy that was temporary during COVID to be made permanent, and has to do around wholesale pricing of liquor to basically the bar and restaurant industry. And the second part of that is within there's also the continuation of the ability to sell alcohol to takeout. So they'd be able to provide to sell takeaway alcohol as part of it, and to make that a permanent. And there are some harm reduction and public health implications around moving forward that, which we've been working on at the municipality. And I think it would be important for the minister to hear that there are some other perspectives and that they should be informed of that before maybe proceeding with a permanent acknowledgement of that.
Okay. So would that just be an amendment to what's listed already, or is this something that can be included after the fact? Like, do we have to? Dr. McNabb, please go ahead.
So just so we're all on the same page, I'd kind of like to see that thought process before we stomp it down on the page. I mean, if we're talking about not allowing bars and restaurants to purchase at a wholesale price, I'm not in favor of that. I think we need to have that perpetuated.
Yeah, I don't think I would make a form an opinion, Director McNabb, one way or the other on. I just want to that the minister be informed of some of the public health implications around that. This is based on very direct science coming from their own ministry, as well as other venues. I'm not directing them in one way or another, just providing that information that I think would be valuable for the minister to be aware of before making those types of decisions to be made permanent. I don't know if Director McNabb, if I could have an offline discussion with you and we could table, I think we have till June 30th, I believe. If that, maybe if I could alleviate some of the concerns around that on an offline discussion, might be of some value, or not.
Well, I mean, we've got an industry that is on its knees, and it's going to take a very long time to recover. And so if we're taking an opportunity and a kind of a value-added situation away from them, you know, I want to know why. That's all. Thanks.
Sure. And as I suggested, it may be there are some public health policy implications that surround this that supersede maybe the industry itself, but is in direct relationship to this specific provision for them. This is in no way trying to undermine the ability of this industry to continue forward in a profitable manner.
Next, I have Director Cole, and then we'll come back to me for a moment.
Forgive me if I'm missing a piece here, but when Director Steer is referring to wholesale pricing, are we referring to the licensee discount that licensed properties have always received through the LDB?
No, there was the continuation of the ability for, so most of them were allowed, would pay basically the same price you pay when they go to the liquor store to purchase their alcohol to be selling at their venues. There has been a recognition that during the COVID that some of the issues that have arisen in terms of sales and et cetera, that there was a wholesale pricing that was allowed in that. I could give you more specific detail later, but I don't know if in respective time and my jumping in on this at a late date, I could certainly have that conversation offline.
Director Steer, is this a meeting that your council is going to be submitting?
It is, correct.
Okay.
So you could submit it, and then we could bring it back forward to the board if you're not successful to add, although I don't know if we can add after, actually.
That was my question.
Yeah,
And I hate to do this to you at this point in time. I should have maybe connected with you a bit earlier on this, and I apologize.
And the only other challenge is I believe you only get 15 to 20 minutes. So by the time you do introductions, you don't have very long for your topics, just to keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, it is a speed dating. I get it. And, my prepared statements are very succinct and to the point. So it should take no longer than 2 minutes to make my case.
Okay. Thank you. With that, I have Dr. Minions actually.
Thank you. I was just going to say that I think when it comes to this subject, it's reasonably outside of the scope of local governments. I think unless we are very informed, fully informed and fully on the same page, it's something that our local government might not want to tackle. Understanding that there's different consequences in different areas. So if there's area specific consequences that one area feels that they have, then I could see them bringing that forward. But I think it's something that is tricky for us to get too far into. And, full disclosure, I do have a restaurant. So, my perspective on this might be different, but I just caution us to make sure we're fully informed before we take a stance. Thank you.
I'll withdraw my request at this point, recognizing that that this may not be the proper place, and I have submitted through the District of Tofino for that request. And I would love to engage the ACRD board on this topic, maybe in a separate venue, maybe a committee of the whole, to give them a more fulsome discussion. We initiated a municipal alcohol policy in the District of Tofino. It's a very broad-ranging issue, but it does have implications through this legislation, I think, for that larger public health issue. And it is very relevant to our region as the #1 public health issue in our region. Notify our medical health officer continually and has been for many, many years. So it does have relevance, but I'll withdraw at this point to simplify and clarify things, and maybe for next year we can have that conversation in a more fulsome way. Thank you, and I apologize for the delay in this.
No, it's worth a try, and I think there's some interest in seeing any of the literature that's coming out in regards to studies that would kind of link more than a correlational relationship between off sales or the equivalent and
yeah, there's very direct evidence between pricing and accessibility, and so the reams and reams of it I could send you. And that the Center for Addiction and Substance Research at the University of Victoria, their own studies centered out of there, the World Health Organization, the list goes on. So I at any time I'd be willing to share that information.
If you could email me a few good links, then that would be good.
That would be great. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so with that in mind, I think that's it for the any additionals. Could we have a motion to go with what we have here? Thank you, Director Beckett. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Cole and Bodner. Last chance, any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, that brings us to electoral area directors only planning matters. So we're finally getting to the temporary use permit here pretty soon anyway. So I'm wondering if we could have Mike please introduce 9.18. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Jack. I think I'm going to introduce that if I could.
Sorry, Alex.
That's okay. Yeah. So the first application we have for you is a rezoning application to facilitate a 2-lot subdivision within the Haggard Cove development in the Alberni Inlet. The applicants have satisfied all of the conditions of rezoning approval, and staff recommend that the bylaw be adopted at this time. Happy to answer any questions anybody might have. Thank you.
Doesn't look like there's any comments or questions. Director Beckett, did you want to move a motion or?
Please, Mr. Chair, I would move that bylaw P1410 Regional District of Alberni Kennecott Zoning Atlas Amendment bylaw be adopted.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Bodner. Okay. All those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Alrighty. That brings us to item B. Please go ahead.
Thank you. The second application we had before you is a rezoning application you've seen before. This is to allow for equipment storage and commercial truck repair industrial uses on a 6-acre portion of property at the corner of Serenga Road and Highway 4. The board last considered this application on March 24th, where the board received a delegation from the applicants who introduced their amended proposal. At that meeting, the board directed staff to amend the bylaws to reflect the amended proposal and refer it back to the Sprout Lake APC. The APC held a meeting on June 10th, where they did not support the application as presented until a more detailed environmental report was provided to assess drainage from the site. Included within your package, the applicants have submitted some new information for the board to consider. There's a letter detailing their amended proposal, which includes a reduction in the size of the industrial zoning from 8.5 acres to 6 acres of area. The addition of a berm, fencing, and revegetation along the highway secured by a covenant, and a drainage plan to deal with surface runoff. They've also included a letter from an engineer that recommends infrastructure that would be put in place to manage the drainage, which includes a perimeter ditch around the site and an oil grit separator from that would flow into a settling pond that would be built on site prior to discharge into the existing ditch. Now, the planning staff recommendation, as it was when you last received it in March, is to deny the application, recognizing that the challenges posed by industrial development along the highway corridor and the fact that it being contrary to the policies and objectives of the OCP, the Sprout Lake OCP. I do know that the board has directed staff to draft a spot zoning policy that will help the board and the public consider applications for commercial and industrial developments in areas that are predominantly zoned rural, residential, or agricultural, which we expect to bring forward for the board's consideration once the zoning bylaw review project is further along. And then finally, if the board direction is to proceed with first reading of the bylaw and delegate a public hearing to be held, I just note that the appropriate motions for that are included within the package on page 115 of the agenda. So again, with this one, happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Director Cote, please go ahead.
Thank you. If there is no questions, I would like to proceed. I think that the applicant has stepped up and has provided the information that the APC has asked for. So I'm prepared at this time to support this application and make the recommendation on page 115, knowing that with the covenants or the confirmation that the on-site sewage disposal oil separator will be all put in place. So if there's no, I'll wait to see if anybody would like to ask any questions, but that is my intent, is to make that recommendation.
So this is the recommendation on page
115.
So that would be item 2 then.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Director Shannon, if you would go ahead, and then Director McNabb.
Thank you. I just want clarification that on item 2, bullet 4, C3 is in reference to the letter from McGill Engineering regarding the drainage and everything, and that's where it's covered in this.
Yes, if I may, Director Shannon, thank you. The intent of that proposed condition of rezoning would be that the engineered drainage plan that has been provided by McGill would be a more fulsome plan would be provided on what exactly has to be built on the site, and that the covenant would require that infrastructure is actually in place before the industrial use returns to the site. If that makes sense.
Thank you. And then I would be happy to second Director Cote moving this forward. I'm happy to see that they've done all the work that we've asked, been quite diligent, and as we've talked about, we're short industrial spots. So I would like to see this going to public hearing to see what neighbors have to say.
Okay, thank you for
Mr.
that.
Chair, if the board's intention is to move forward with this, we will need, following discussion, you will need to pass or consider first reading and then pass the resolutions that are presented under item 2. So
Yeah, so it looks like it's a 4-part motion,
Yes.
or 4 separate motions. So if folks can refer to page 115, just so that we can read along, that would be good. Director McNabb, you had a comment.
Yeah, my comment is around this collection system and the maintenance of it. So, I mean, if this thing is left to simply be a collector for 15 years, it's going to be a cesspool. And I'm not sure what requirements, like by Ministry of Environment or whatever, are to maintaining the catch basin. And because it's going to be all heavy metals and goop and nasty things that we don't want. I mean, our biggest problem with this whole thing is what's going to end up in Stamp River, or Sproat River, sorry. Is there some kind of a plan for that?
So I think if the board proceeds with that engineered drainage plan, I think that the long-term maintenance of any infrastructure that they have in place needs to be built into that restrictive covenant that we propose. So if the board proceeds with that route, and that's what we communicate with the applicants, we will ensure that there is some component of follow-up and accountability over the long term with that infrastructure. Thank you for that.
Okay. Any further comments? We do have a motion that's been moved and seconded. Dr. Cote, anything?
Oh, I was just actually going to read the motion, but.
Oh yeah, it hasn't been seconded because it's a bunch of motions, but
Yeah.
So hopefully everyone has a copy of the motion as it's stated. It starts with number 2 at the very top of page 115 in our materials. Dr. Cote, if you'd like to read it out.
Sure. I move that bylaw P1411 Sproat Lake official community plan amendment bylaw be read a first time.
And do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Shannon. Any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried.
Thank you. I'll move that bylaw P1412 Regional District of Alberni Clayoquot Zoning Atlas Amendment bylaw be read a first time.
Thanks. Seconded by Director Roberts. All those in favor? Motion carried.
Thank you. I'll move that the public hearing for bylaws P1411 and P1412 be delegated to the Director of Electoral Area D, the alternate director or chairperson of the regional district.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Shannon. All those in favor? Motion carried.
Thank you. And move that the Board of Directors confirm the adoption of P1411 and P1412 are subject to the following: a confirmation from a registered on-site wastewater practitioner that the property can accommodate on-site sewage disposal system for the purposed industrial use and caretaker dwelling. B, positive referral response from the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure regarding industrial road access off Syringa Road. C, registration of restrictive covenants to limit to industrial use to closed storage and warehousing, open storage, and motor vehicle and commercial truck repair. 2, require landscape screening that includes a berm, fencing, and no vegetation removal between any industrial zoned area and Highway 4 and any adjacent rural residential and agricultural properties. Screening plan to be provided to the satisfaction of the ACRD. 3, require an engineered drainage plan that considers pollutant control from surface runoff from the industrial zoned area. Drainage infrastructure to be in place prior to any industrial use of the property. And 4, restrict any future subdivision of the industrial zoned area. D, meet all technical referral agency requirements.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Bodnar. Comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? Motion carried. Okay. Okay, thank you for that. That was interesting. Sorry, I'm just going back to the agenda. Okay, so that brings us to item C, which is Spurt Lake item. Is that Alex or Mike?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this application is a rezoning application on 9001 Central Lake Road. The board received the public hearing minutes and report at the last meeting on June 9th. Following the public hearing, the applicant was considering potential changes to their application. They have since confirmed with staff that they wish to proceed with the Acreage Cottage Residential District as proposed, which would permit one single-family dwelling and up to 4 cottages on the property. So staff do recommend that the board proceed with second and third readings of the bylaws. Final approval of this rezoning would be conditional upon the applicant agreeing to a covenant preventing future subdivision of the property, confirmation of water and on-site septic capability to allow for the for up to 4 cottages, and then meeting technical referral agency requirements. So thank you.
So those items would follow up at another meeting once it's been completed?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a timeline after we've made this decision that has to be done by?
There's not. The Local Government Act requires that there's one meeting between third reading and adoption. So,
At least, yeah, unless there's special circumstances.
exactly.
Yeah.
So we allow this opportunity to finalize those conditions of rezoning. We are aware that there is a 1-year period in common law between the holding of a public hearing and adoption of the bylaw. That if you exceed a year, it is wise to
Do it again.
To do it again. So
okay,
that's where we're at. Thank you.
Okay, that's good. And it's always good to have time in between third reading and adoption if you can afford it. So, sorry, Director Cote, did you have?
I had a question about this, and I was hoping that the applicant would actually have come back with a change to the application to have less than 4 cabins. The question is around water accessibility and the determination of that this property has the ability to produce water for 4 cottages and a home. But what will that do to the other neighboring water supplies? I'd like to ask that the regional district look for grants or ask the province to investigate the ability for water in this area. It's always been a question for development coming forward in this area. So I will go ahead with second and third reading, but with the stipulation that water will be available for this development. There is other developments, applications that are coming forward very near this in the future that are in the works. And I don't know that there's enough water to sustain all of this development. So before we give final adoption, I would like to know that there is available water, but we'll move forward at this moment. And is that, I'd like to know from staff, is that the proper way to proceed with this application?
So this was an issue that was discussed at length at the public hearing, absolutely. The condition that the board has placed upon this is that the applicants confirm that they have the ability to provide water for their 4 cottages that they want to build. In our opinion, the overall impact on the water supply in the area is unknown at this point, and with groundwater being regulated by the province and outside of the scope of any one development application, a larger groundwater assessments, looking at the development impacts and studying that in the area should be a community-driven project that is ultimately led by the province. So we are in support of that. If the board wishes to proceed with second and third readings of this application at this time, then We will work with the applicants to confirm that they had the ability to service their own development, unless you would like to add an additional condition to that.
I don't want to create a problem for the residents that are out there, the existing property owners. I would like to move this forward, but I was expecting, like I said, the applicant to make a change to their application to decrease some of the cabins. If we approve this at this time, can we, before adoption, say that you can limit your cabins to, say, 2 cabins?
Yeah, so one of the changes that the board can make to a bylaw after public hearing and before adoption is a reduction in density. Sorry, Mike, you go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to jump in. Just it's very specific around the legislation in that if the applicant, we can after following a public hearing, there is the ability to reduce the density of the proposed development, but that is conditional on the applicant agreeing.
That's correct. Yeah.
So so we can't unilaterally just say, as a board, you can't unilaterally say change the density without going back and triggering a public hearing and a discussion with the applicant. So if the applicant brings forward an option to reduce the density and leave the use the same, then that application, the bylaw can proceed without triggering another public hearing or invalidating the process.
I'm sorry to drag this out, but I have some questions. So would it be permissible then for us at the time of adoption to say the only way that you could adopt this is if we limit lessen the density then? Because I'm not sure how long it would take for us to find out what the water ability is in the area, knowing that climate change is here and drought is a definite factor in so many different areas of Sprout Lake, even though we are right beside a lake.
So as Mike said, rather than the board applying that condition right now, it may be best to defer a decision on this application and allow us to communicate that with the applicants and discuss whether they would be interested in reducing the density that this would allow, and then if they are open to that, we can bring this back to the board with that additional condition applied, and then you could proceed with second and third readings if that may be an option.
Okay, I would feel more comfortable with just taking this back to the applicant and trying to find out more information regarding the water at this time. Also knowing that there is other applications right behind it that are also going to be taxing the water that's in this area. So I'd like to, at this time, wouldn't be table it would be, what would be the proper motion?
I think it could be
motion to defer.
Defer. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, I would make a motion to defer this application at this time.
Okay. For deferrals, do we have to identify a time when it'll be back, or no? Okay.
No.
All right. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Shannon. Any comments, Director McNabb?
So just point of order. So this has gone through a public hearing and now we're soliciting new information. Does that work?
So the
answer that, Alex.
Yeah.
The reduction in density was actually discussed in the public hearing as well. But I mean, that is a concern that we'll have to look into. I do know that the number of cottages and the number of dwellings that they were allowed to build and that they intend to build was a matter that was discussed in the public hearing.
I thought,
but what we're soliciting is the availability of water, which was never a discussion in the public hearing. So it's new information. So that's all I'm worried about.
I thought for public hearings, the new information was communications from the public rather than questions being answered by staff that the director brought up. And I think that's the balance point. And I'm not sure if that's the case, but I think it is, because I think information in this case is defined with a capital I, and it's during the actual thing. So if the question was begged in some way during that, then this is follow-up for it, perhaps. But I don't know for sure, and I'm not a lawyer, obviously. So that being said, we do have time to respond to the item. Mike, thoughts?
Yeah, so certainly if we start introducing new information not discussed in the public hearing, that can invalidate the public hearing. So it's not just information from the public. It's if staff were to rewrite a new report or to get new information, and Alex and I will sit down and sort of go over what's needed. Certainly the density component that we were discussing, that's very clear that there is an ability to reduce the density. So a reduction in the number of cabins permitted is density, and in certain circumstances that can be done following a public hearing. So we'll bring the information back, and then if at any time if the board decides that additional information is needed, even if it was to require a public hearing, I mean, that is always something that we can do. If it assists the board in their decision making, and certainly the concerns around water. I just don't know what information we'd be able to provide other than what we've already discussed and what was discussed at the public hearing, as far as the applicant providing information for their specific property.
Thank you, Director Roberts.
Through the chair to Mr. Erg. So the concern that I'm hearing is for water, potable water. Is it not? Do they have the ability to drill a well or a second well on that site?
Yes, they do. Yes. Yes. Yeah. There is no there's no community water system out there. Everybody's on a well. All the properties.
Okay. Thanks. I don't know if the aquifer is capable of supporting or not, but it certainly would be something to look into as well. Thank you.
Yeah, especially if Director Cote thinks that there may be other applicants looking to increase the load, it might be a good idea to figure out what the questions and answers need to be now and then apply them to those ones later too. Director Cote?
Thank you. It was the problem about the water was discussed at the public hearing, and the need to do an assessment of what the water ability is in the area. So that's why I'm asking for this.
Okay. All right. So the motion to defer was moved and seconded. So I think we'll just go proceed. So all those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried.
Excuse me, Director Jack, I apologize, I should have mentioned this earlier, but for the next two items, D and E, I have to remove myself due to conflict of interest.
Okay, you got it before we got to it though, so that's fine.
Yes.
So
okay.
So we'll have someone put you in the waiting room and then just bring you back.
Sure. Okay, thank you very much.
So I'll wait for that, Janice, if you want to do that, hopefully. Because I don't think I'm a host. No, I'm not.
There we go.
Alrighty.
And I will speak to the next two if that's okay, Mr. Chair.
Please go ahead.
Okay, and my computer timed out on me here. There we go. So the next one is a rezoning application on Taylor Arm Drive for Mickety. The overall property is a large property at just over 93 acres. The area that is the subject of this rezoning application is on actually fronting Sprout Lake and is approximately 7.9 acres. The intent is to develop or create 5 waterfront parcels. I would note that this application complies with the Sprout Lake OCP. If subdivided as presented into 5 lots, park plan dedication would be a requirement at subdivision stage. It has certainly been part of the discussion with this application. So if the board does proceed with first reading with this, staff would refer, as part of the referral process, would refer this to the Sprout Lake Parks Commission for their input as a technical referral agency. And I think that's, the APC did meet on June 10th and recommended that this application proceed. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you for that. We do have 1, 2, 3, just the 3 motions. Dr. Cote, please go ahead.
Thank you. Only in Sprout Lake. So this development, there's a catch to this one also, that the Crown land lying north of the property has interest from the Sprout Lake Parks Commission, but has not been thoroughly investigated as to what the cost would be to develop that park, and there has been no plan made that is required by the province at this time. So this application is for a portion of this, I believe it's 93 acres. And this is the only portion of this property that has water access. So at this time, I would like to move this with the covenants put in place. So I'd like to move that bylaw P1430, Regional District of Alberni Clayoquot Zoning Atlas Amendment bylaw be read a first time.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director McNabb. All right, comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? Motion carried.
I would move.
Director Jack, I'm just going to get a water, so I'll be right. I'm hearing you.
Oh, okay. Oh, he's got the range. See, I'm on a wire.
Okay, so I would move that the public hearing for bylaw P1430 be delegated to the electoral area director, electoral area D, the alternate director or chairperson of the regional district.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Shannon. Comments? All those in favor? All right, motion carried.
Thank you. And that the board of directors confirm that adoption of bylaw P1430 is subject to A, agreement to include the property within the Sprout Lake Fire Protection Service area, and B, a registration of a restrictive covenant requiring suitable public access to water within this development and acceptable to the ACRD, and also to Crown land not lying north of the property at time of subdivision.
And meeting technical referral agency requirements.
Yes, and meetings, technical referral agency requirements, yes.
Great. Seconder, thank you, Director Roberts. Any comments or questions? Director Roberts, go ahead. And then Director Shannon.
Yeah, thanks for that. Can you read that last part about the registration of restrictive covenant again? There's some other stuff thrown in there that I didn't read on my paper.
It's not on there. So registration of a restrictive covenant acceptable to the ACRD requiring suitable public access to water within the development and to the Crown land lying north of the property at time of subdivision.
So that extra part, the water, are you referring to like a pond or a stream, or is it
It's
like,
access to the lake.
oh, it's the lake itself?
This,
Okay.
if you look at the map, this is the only portion of that 93 acres that is water access, and he's wanting to develop it. So looking forward to supporting this development would be so that there is access for the rest of that piece of property to have access to the lake.
Okay, so instead of water, could you just say Sprout Lake itself?
Sprout Lake.
Yeah, okay,
Yes, I'll make that amendment.
Yep.
Change.
if that's okay. Director Shannon, did you have a similar question with that?
Director Roberts going to ask my question, but now I have another question. Were the other properties that were there, do they have to provide access to the public to the lake if they're doing a development?
So, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, please go
So there's two things that trigger in subdivision. So if under certain conditions, so the size of lots proposed are greater than 3 new lots. So there's a parkland dedication requirement. There's also a for proper under the Land Title Act. So it's at subdivision stage. There's a requirement to that the approving officer has to consider access to water for upland properties when there is, I think it's for every 1,000 feet, 300 meters of shoreline, there has to be a public access. So around Sprout Lake, you see road allowances periodically. So that is an option. And it is also an option to combine the access to water requirements. So say the road allowance and park to provide a more suitable or better public access to the lake. And that's something that as staff, we work with the, we can work with the applicant and have this information to be discussed at the public hearing. And the recommendation is from the board is to include that in a covenant. So it's guaranteed when the property is subdivided. Yeah, no, good questions.
Okay. Any further comments or questions? Okay, seeing none. So with the amendment on the third of these, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Okay, that brings us to the next item, which is item E. And
so this is the same property owner, but a different property on Sprout Lake. This is on Sterling Arm Crescent, 9648 Sterling Arm Crescent. And this is a development variance application to reduce the setbacks from for a small intermittent water course. So there's a very small stream on the property. And the variance would be for an accessory building, an addition to the single family dwelling, and for a deck to be added to the single family dwelling. And they are quite close, but I would just note that this is a small stream, and there's a portion of it on an adjacent property that is actually culverted where it goes through a property. The applicant has engaged a biologist to do an assessment to support this. And I would also note that the original house was built, it's much closer than the current zoning bylaw setback. So this development variance would also resolve that the current setback issue for the house. And it was also reviewed by the Advisory Planning Commission earlier this month, and the APC recommended that this application proceed to the next stage. And again, happy to answer any questions.
Director Cote, please go ahead.
Thank you. An easy one. I'd make the recommendation that the Board of Directors consider issuing development variance permit DVD 20011, subject to neighboring properties being notified as per Local Government Act S499.
Thank you, Director Shannon. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Okay. Motion carried.
And if Janice or somebody could let Director Bodner in, and I will let Alex deal with the next three. Sorry, not
Looks like
Director Hobbs.
Director Bodner may have hung up, so we're resending her the invite.
Okay. So I'm going to take advantage of this and ask if we can take a recess until 4 o'clock, just for a bio break. So it's about 8 minutes or thereabouts. So, okay. Thank you. See you in a bit. Okay. So thank you all for your patience. That brings us to, I believe, item F, and I think Alex is going to take on this one. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, please go ahead.
All right, so this is another rezoning application we have before you to rezone a property located at 4720 Dayton Road in the Beaver Creek area to rezone from RA2 district to RA3 district in order to accommodate a 2-lot subdivision with a 0.6 acre minimum lot size. The Beaver Creek APC considered this application on June 15th, where they supported the application as presented. Planning staff recommend that the board proceed with first reading and delegate a public hearing to be held. Thank you.
So interesting discussion at this APC meeting with regards to a large mobile home that was being, or RV that was being used as a secondary residence. So interesting to see the different thought processes within the community about where we should go with regards to living in RVs. But that's really not part of this thing. So I would move that bylaw P1429 Regional District of Alberni-Clayoquot Zoning Atlas Amendment bylaw be read for the first time.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Roberts. All right, any further comments or questions? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? Motion carried.
I'd move that the public hearing for bylaw P1429 be delegated to the Director of Electoral Area E and the alternate director or the chairperson of the regional district. Do I read the rest of this?
No, then there's the third one, and then you just read the rest of all those 3 lines together next time. Yeah. I missed who seconded that, sorry. Thank you, Dr. Shannon. Okay. All those in favor? Motion carried.
And that the Board of Directors confirm that the adoption of bylaw P1429 is subject to confirmation of registered on-site wastewater practitioner that the property is capable of accommodating on-site sewer disposal to a minimum of 0.6 acres density and meeting technical referral agency requirements.
All right, thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Cote. Okay, all those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, that brings us to the next item.
Okay, the next item we have for you is a rezoning application to rezone the non-ALR portion of the property located at 7799 Beaver Creek Road in the Beaver Creek area from A1 to RA2. This would be to accommodate a 2-lot subdivision, creating a minimum 1 acre lot outside of the ALR and retaining the remainder of the property as 1 lot within the ALR. The Beaver Creek APC considered this application at their last meeting, where they passed a motion to support the application and also to recommend that the rezoning be referred to the Cuts Common Family Development Center as part of the agency referral process ahead of the public hearing, which we'd be happy to do. Planning staff recommend here that the board proceed with first reading of the bylaw and delegate a public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would move that bylaw P1431 Regional District of Alberni-Clayoquot Zoning Atlas Amendment bylaw be read for the first time.
Thank you, Director McNabb. Seconded by Director Roberts. And did you have a comment? Please go ahead.
Sorry, through the chair to Mr. Dyer. Is all of this property, is it in the ALR?
No, the front portion of the property, there's about 1.2 acres along the road on the south side that's outside of the ALR, and that's where they're intending to create the new lot.
Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Okay, any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried.
And I would move that the public hearing for bylaw P1431 be delegated to the Director of Electoral Area E, the alternate director of, or the chairperson of the regional district.
Thank you. Seconded by Director Shannon. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried.
And that the Board of Directors confirm that the adoption of bylaw P1431 is subject to confirmation of registered on-site wastewater practitioner that the property is capable of accommodating on-site sewage disposal to a minimum of 0.6 acres density.
And the technical referral.
Oh, sorry, missed it.
Yeah.
Meeting the technical referral agency requirements, right?
Okay, no problem. I think we need to put like an indent for any like the subs, you know, because it is easy to miss. Okay, do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Bodnar. Any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried.
People are going to double the size of Beaver Creek. Okay, so the next one is, or I guess we got to get it introduced here. Sorry, Alec.
Happy to do that. Thank you, Director McNabb. We have another rezoning application. This one is to rezone the 2-acre property located at 6411 Beaver Creek Road. Again, this one is in the Beaver Creek area from A1 to RA2 in order to accommodate subdivision that would split the property in half, creating 2 1-acre lots. Again, the Beaver Creek APC considered this application at their last meeting where they concurred with the staff recommendation and supported the application. And once again, with this one, planning staff recommend first reading of the bylaws and that we proceed with delegating a public hearing. Thank you.
So this one's a little bit interesting because it's they're going to use a road right away that currently is not totally, like it's there, but it's not used. So it's interesting to see what MOT will do about it. You know, how they'll approach it. So we'll want to see how that's about. Learning circle. I'd move that bylaw P1432 Regional District of Albany Clayoquot Zoning Atlas Amendment bylaw be read for the first time.
We have a seconder. Thank you, Director Beckett. Any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried.
I move that the public hearing for bylaw P1432 be delegated to the Director for Electoral Area E or an alternate director or the chairperson of the regional district.
Okay, and seconder. Thank you, Director Cote. Okay, all those in favor? Motion carried.
And I'd move that the Board of Directors confirm that the adoption of bylaw P1432 is subject to confirmation of registered on-site wastewater practitioner that the property is capable of accommodating on-site sewage disposal to a minimum of 1 acre density and meeting technical referral agency requirements. Does that include this road right away?
Yes, the Ministry of Transportation will be referred on that. We'll be looking forward to what their requirements may be. Thank you.
And were you seconding or did you have a comment, Dr. Roberts? Just seconding? Okay. Okay, all those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Twos like this. Not the other way around.
That's all the damage I can do. Somebody else's turn.
Okay, that brings us to item I, which is Cherry Creek.
Okay, so for the board's consideration here, we have the report and minutes from a public hearing that was held on June 14th for bylaw P1424, which is a zoning amendment bylaw to rezone the property located at 6124 Strathcona Street in the Cherry Creek area from A1 to RA2 to accommodate subdivision to a 1 acre minimum lot size. Planning staff recommend that the board receive the public hearing report and minutes and proceed with second and third readings of this bylaw.
Great. Diane, did you want to move these four in order? You're muted though.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Yes, I move that the Board of Directors receive the public hearing report.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Shannon. All those in favor? Motion carried.
And I move that the Board of Directors receive the public hearing minutes.
Thank you, Director Shannon. All those in favor? Motion carried.
And I move that bylaw P1424, Regional District of Alberni Clay and bylaw be read a second time.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Director McNabb. All those in favor? Motion carried.
And I move that bylaw P1424, Regional District of Alberni Claycourt Zoning Atlas Amendment bylaw be read a third time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, all those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, and finally, item J.
Thank you. I think Mr. Erg is going to introduce this one.
Speak to this. I think everybody has read, and there was a good discussion earlier in the board meeting. A couple of points I wanted to make. The board did review this at the June 9th meeting, board meeting, and was considering denying the application, invited the applicant to speak, which they did today. And staff are recommending that the board deny this application. I would note if the board does deny this application, staff will meet with the property owner and report back to the board at a later meeting with a plan on how to bring this property into compliance. And following the discussion today, just a couple of comments I wanted to make. First, around the septic, what I understood the applicant to say is there was 2 septic fields put in, one to handle the 22 sites and the other to handle the additional campsites and the clubhouse restaurant. And also wanted to note that when I was one of the staff that was on site, and I was on site in March, and there were 31 RVs on site. One of those was the applicants. So I counted several times because I wanted to make sure about that. So, and then if the board has any questions, I am happy to answer them.
Great, Director McNabb. And then
So,
Director Cote.
So the one thing I noticed on this when I did a drive through here is that this thing isn't built to a standard that would be typically recognized as an RV park. That the roadways, the spacing between the units, when they initially did this, it was for the 22 units, and now they've got 28 to 30, and the neighbors had the opportunity to actually to consider the temporary use permit on the 22 units, and that was what was given to the Ministry of Transport for access egress, Cherry Creek Fire Department, the water system, everything else. So I mean, my personal thinking is that we should give them a temporary use permit for the 22 sites for a very short period of time, so that they can arrange themselves in putting it into an actual zoning and conforming to whatever regiment that it's out there for an actual RV park. If you look at the difference between this and the one at Timber Lodge, there's a significant difference in them. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Sorry, next up I have Dr. Cote and then Dr. Minions. And Dr. Bodnar, I'll put you on the list.
Thank you. It was a very interesting presentation earlier from Heather Powell. It seems to me, my determination from what she said was that her application changed sort of midway when COVID struck. So I have two trains of thought here. One is that we need housing, and this could work. The other one says that the temporary use permit is not. I can't support approving a temporary use permit for what the application was made for, because it's no longer following that train. I don't know where to go because I don't want to approve the temporary use permit, but I believe that there's a need, and I believe that they would like to make the changes that are needed to help to provide a facility that would accept RVs. Although I don't think that people, this is not a satisfactory long-term solution for housing, but it's a short term. So at this time, I'm not sure what alternative we could have besides approving the temporary use permit, which is not suitable for this application. So do staff have another solution for us? Thanks.
Did you want to have the other directors speak, and then I can certainly.
Yeah, I think that might be a
questions or-
better idea. So we'll get to Director Minions and then Director Bodnar, and then we'll go to you, Mike, if that helps.
Thank you. I'll echo Director Cote's comments somewhat. I think it's really important for us to recognize in a situation like this that we are in an extreme housing crisis in this community. So whatever action we take, we need to take really thoughtfully about that and what the actual impact of this is going to be. That said, I don't think that we should approve something just because of a housing crisis. We need to ensure that every application that we do approve, we're careful in approving and that they're in compliance. And it sounds like this one is certainly out of compliance at the time. So I would suggest that a couple things. I think that an issue like this needs public input, and a rezoning gives that opportunity for the public to have input into whether or not the public feels this is a suitable type of housing and a suitable type of housing for the regional district as the local government to be enabling. I think that's a public conversation, and my feeling is the public will want to enable it, but I think that we have an obligation to ask in a situation like this. So I don't know if there's an opportunity to work with the applicant to bring them somewhat into compliance, or at least to a point where they can submit a rezoning application that could be supported. And maybe that's, maybe their temporary use permit just sits in lieu until that process is completed, until we get to the point of putting forward a rezoning. But I think it's important that we not make any rash decisions. And I know that staff has said in the past that, they wouldn't just be asked to leave overnight. There would be a plan in place. But at the end of the day, there's nowhere for this amount of residents in the community to go currently. And so there just isn't another option. I think our best bet is to try to bring them into compliance and engage the community in a discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, I have Director Bodnar.
Yes, in the big picture, I think we certainly should encourage rezoning because to have that public input. I just feel that if it seems to me given them a temporary permit, and if we are going to do well, except under extenuating circumstances, then maybe that should be in the temporary permit because they are not compliant. And this is somebody who has been in, as they said, for 16 years now, dealing with as business people. They know about permits. They know that they have to be, I would think if your business that long, you would know about permits, when they are due. And it wasn't until they seemed to be forced into, oh yes, we better do something about this permit. So whatever it takes, I think, to encourage them to rezone, I think we should go that route myself.
Okay, thanks for that. I think unless other directors have any comments, we can have Mike.
Director McNabb, I think, had his hand up. So.
Oh, sorry, Director McNabb, please go ahead.
So there recently there has been 3 of these that have been either redeveloped or developed, and 2 of them are not in currently are very close to being in the system and not are in the system. One of them is on Sachat, on going up Waters Hill on the left-hand side. And the other one is right by the fire hall at Sprout Lake Fire Hall, the Bishop Fire Hall. So these people have put the money into these facilities, including the Timber Lodge one, to make them what they're supposed to be. And, it's the availability of laundry, the availability of showers, because I know in the one I'm involved in, even though all of the units that are in the site, all of them are capable of people showering in them. 30–40% of the people don't. They shower in the common showers. And so I'm not really 100% sure what our bylaws with regards to an RV park are concerned, and the requirements are concerned. But the people around this area, originally they were talking 22 sites and 22 units coming in and out of there, and now they're talking 30, and on a very narrow residential road that has about 9 or 10 properties that these units have to go forward and back on, and plus the access onto the highway is not the best. So if they're talking one way in, one way out, the access back onto the Albany Highway towards the mall, or if that's the way they're coming in, is problematic, and it has had a lot of accidents. So I'm not sure what the Ministry of Transport is going to think of an expanded facility more than what they've originally agreed to in the first place, what they're going to say about that. But, I think it's viable if it's done right. It just isn't done right. And so I support it being done right, and I support the transition to get it to be done right. But I think all we can do formally is issue a very short term. They've already had 1 year of a TUP that they didn't either pay for or have commitment by regional district. So give them another year, give them a chance to actually rezone this and come up with a plan that looks like business, and go from there. I've had quite a few complaints about this myself, the look of this thing. I'm sure that other, like Director Bodner probably has as well. Yes. I'm not quite sure why I'm getting them in Beaver Creek. I guess I have to drive by it. But anyhow, that's what I'd like us to consider. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any other comments? Please go ahead, Mike.
Sure. Just there was a couple of sort of questions and a couple of comments that I wanted to make. And so I would encourage the board to look at this from, is this a good land use decision? When this was originally applied for, the intent was it was going to be operated as a seasonal campsite, and certainly things have changed in the last 15 months with COVID. We all recognize that. Staff was very concerned when we saw the expansion of the site to well in excess of the 22 campsites that were permitted, which certainly affects our recommendation. And I think I just want to, the difference between a temporary use permit and zoning, besides zoning is permanent, where a temporary use permit, by nature is short term. There is also additional controls that we could put into a temporary use permit that we can't put into a rezoning application. So we can limit numbers, and we could actually charge like a bond, things like that. As well, I would want, before we proceeded with anything, would want to confirm the health and safety aspects. Would want to confirm with Island Health around the sewage, and with the Cherry Creek Fire Department around fire protection. On whatever scale, if that's what you're doing. The other option is, if the board was to deny it, again, we can work sort of as long as health and safety issues are dealt with on an orderly transition. This property hasn't been compliant with the zoning bylaw since May of 2020. So that is also an option. If the board is wanting to look at something, you know, if the board does not want to deny this application at this time, and wants to provide some direction on a temporary use permit, I would recommend that you refer it back to staff to develop
To answer the questions that
more, yeah, and come up with more conditions and ensure that health and safety concerns are dealt with.
Okay.
But again, that's just wanted to make sure the board understands that if it is denied, you know, we will still work with the on coming up with a transition plan. That is something that's within the board's scope, but so is rezoning and so is issuing a temporary use permit. So Director Roberts, I noticed his hand up.
Yes, I have Dr. Shannon and then Director Roberts.
Thank you. My apologies if this was discussed. I had to take a phone call. But I have a couple questions because when we do a temporary use permit, it can be renewed once as per my understanding. So it could be a total of 6 years and then it would go to rezoning. So my question is kind of procedure this way is this person has put in infrastructure for sewage and electrical for all these sites. Like say we were at the end of the 6 years, what would the next step be if we were like, we talk about the number of units, they'll look on the highway. If you could walk me through that.
Sure. So the temporary use permit, the permit itself actually talks about that. It talks about you know, renewing when it expires, and if it is not renewed, that the owner has to bring the property, return the property to its current or previous condition and use, right? So certainly when this owner went into this, they were fully aware that it was a temporary use permit. Any things related to the campsite that they put in under the conditions of the permit that was issued required them to return it to the original use. So that, you know, that's built into the permit. So that is something that we have.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then next up, I have Director Roberts.
Thanks for that, through the chair. Do we have to, you know, I appreciate what Heather had said about all the work they've done that, but again, it was not conforming to the temporary use permit, and they continued on with it. Now they've also talked about the secondary Sandy field to handle it, the additional 6 that they've allowed in there over the 22. And she also made a comment that they were going to even expand it more to even 30. So, you know, I'm concerned about it. I'm concerned about the lack of continuity that they've shown. I'm also concerned that, you know, in order to bring this up to standard, that can we or should we deny temporary use, and or can this be deferred to the next meeting to see if there's compliance in any way, shape, or form? Thank you.
Yeah.
Certainly can. It's always the board's prerogative to defer an application if that's something you wish to do.
Okay, Director Shannon, go ahead, and then Director Bodner.
Thank you. So if we're looking at rezoning, because Heather made it quite clear, I think earlier in our meeting, that she would like to rezone this, does it apply to the 1.99 acres, or does it also apply to the part of the property that's within the ALR as well? Or does that get muddy?
So we can, as a board, the regional district can rezone a portion of a property. So when there's ALR property involved, it makes sense to rezone along the ALR boundary and not. We wouldn't get approval from the Land Commission to put a campground on the ALR portion.
Yeah. Can you give me a minute? Okay. Sorry. No, that was my question. Thank you.
Director Bodner?
Yes. Would it be appropriate then to make a motion that this application be denied and that the board refer this application to staff to provide appropriate conditions and referral to Island Health?
So Is it necessary to apply for conditions if we're going to deny it?
Yeah, so my advice, if the board is
I don't
considering
know.
denying it,
I'm trying to find a way to.
absolutely, if I can. So my advice would be that the board, if the board's going to deny an application, then the motion should be just to deny, you know, as a separate motion. And then if we want to have further discussion around how to enforce an application, or sorry, a property that's not in compliance with the zoning bylaw, we can do that as well.
So
Right, and so I did note in the staff report that if the board does deny it, staff would meet with the property owner. So I would meet with the property owner, talk about, you know, a time frame and how to bring the property into compliance.
So that wouldn't have to be part of the motion then.
It does not have to be part of the motion.
No, if you're just inclined to deny, then that can just stand as it is, and then we can follow up with what bringing them down looks like. But if you want to gonna take some time and then try to come up with some conditions for a temporary use permit to exist while they're working on the rezone, then that would be a separate decision. So you could either deny and just let the deny stand and we'll figure it out after with how that'll look, or you buy time with a temporary use permit potentially in the future with certain conditions that must be met while they work on a rezone. So it's either of those two, I think. It's mostly been talked about here.
Yes,
So it's still going back to staff regardless.
No, well, kind of. It depends though, because you have to decide whether or not you want to give them a chance with a temporary use permit or just deny it entirely. Yeah. We can defer as well, but at this point, I will just remind everyone once we get there again that we have to make a decision at some point.
So it would be faster actually to deny it, then things are liable to move along faster than.
I think our administration can move things along either way. But if you deny, then they have to make a bunch of changes to be compliant with with what's sitting there. And it's whether or not you want to impose that based on whatever your decision-making process is. And then, or the other option is, okay, we'll give you some space and time to do whatever it is you're doing with a temporary use permit, but it's going to have this list of conditions, and that's what staff would work on, right?
And there would be time limits to that.
Yeah, they could be imposed based on whatever the rules are and whatever your inclinations are, in that order. Yeah, it's tough. And the other thing you can do is just kind of go, can I take some more time to sit with Mike and figure this out for myself? Because I think Director Cote had to deal with some really difficult decisions in the past too. She might have some advice in terms of what you want to do. But there's no shame in taking time, but I'm going to be that guy pointing at the calendar or my watch at the next meeting.
Okay.
But Director Cote, if you wanted to speak, please go ahead. And then Dr. Beckett.
Thank you. This is a very difficult situation because you want to do the right thing. If I was in your position right now, Director Bodner, I think I would refer back to staff to come back to come forward with some different options for us to look at. I think that denying it right at this moment puts us all into a position where it's the end, where things have to change. But we can just defer for the moment and allow staff to come forward with some different options, and let yourself and the applicant also try to come forward with some solutions.
Yeah, I like that. Okay.
Sorry, Director Bodner. I have Director Beckett and then Director McNabb, and then we can come back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Great discussion, great debate. Given the circumstances with housing, I want to see them succeed. I want them to recognize that we mean business with respect to identifying what the expectations are for them to be in compliance, to operate appropriately, and be good neighbors. So I am looking and interested in a process that will get us there as opposed to ending up in the courts. So at this point, I'm in favor and in agreement with a temporary use permit, but I really am interested in knowing what Director Bodner thinks about that.
Okay, so we'll have Director McNabb, and then we'll go right back to you, Diane. Oh, you're.
Problem that I see here is the neighbors have not condoned this rise from 22 to 30. And they need to have that opportunity. When we put the temporary use permit out there and we canvassed the neighborhood, it was on 22 sites. So, now they're at 30 so, I mean, it really needs to go to a rezoning application where there's a public hearing and everybody can actually get, establish what the rules are and what it's going to look like and, what we need for the whole thing. So that's where I want to get to is the rezoning. So I don't know, Mike, if, what path you want us to take to get there.
So if the board's looking at a long-term rezoning, I would recommend that we, in the staff report, if the board's wanting to move this along, refer it back to staff to develop a temporary use permit with conditions. And then we don't have a rezoning application right now. So the owner has told us, she told us back in 2017, that she wanted to consider a rezoning application. We've never received one. I did recommend, at this stage that we just go through a temporary use permit renewal, because that, then we can consider the conditions. I would note that going forward with this one, that this will be a property and a file that we will have to monitor very closely and will take up time, just given the history that we've already experienced this year. Sort of whatever conditions are put on, we will have to, I'll work on them closely to make sure there's things that we can enforce and that we will have to monitor and make sure that those conditions are met. So I don't know if hopefully that's helpful.
Does that sound okay, Director Bodner? Would you like to move that? Oh, yeah. You can just nod. You're muted though. Yeah. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director McNabb. Any further comments?
Just that we really have to realize that this thing has to go back to the TOP level. So it's 22, because that's the only thing that's been approved by the neighbors.
I think that's been.
Just for,
go ahead.
I'll bring back a report and lay out all of the requirements and the public process that's also involved.
Yeah, and I think that's well heard by staff as well, Director McNabb. I think that's probably square one. Dr. Paulson?
Just a matter of clarification and through the chair to Mike, can we actually issue a temporary use permit on a property that's out of compliance already?
Yes.
Yes, we can. Legally, we can, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Because we have to choose to do something about it. So it's, yeah.
Thank you for all your help, everybody. I needed that.
No, this is good. This is a teaching experience, and it's helping me understand the EA processes that you have to go through. With that, all those in favor? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to staff reports. Would anyone like to pull anything out? Because I think they're all just for our information. Okay, if there aren't any items, if we could have a motion to receive the staff reports. Thank you, Dr. Beckett, seconded by Dr. Roberts. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Okay, there are no committee reports, and we're coming up on member reports. 911, Director.
So I'll give you the short and sweet instead of the long and boring. We did complete a very large contract with a Mid-Island community that we still need to keep under wraps a little bit, but a very large contract, and it currently, at this point, I believe it's now active. So, and that's great. And the other thing that was completed was a backup with Fort Fraser George. Is that it? Fraser Fort George on the mainland for a backup service, integral backup. So if they go down, we look after them. It's collaborative. So a very good thing, because our one with Nanaimo expires June 30th, because they're going with Ecom out of Vancouver. So that's it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Regional Library, Dr. Cote.
Thank you. We have a meeting on Friday to discuss budget. We're also looking at recruitment for replacement for Rosemary Bonanno, and also strategic planning will be coming forward very soon. With the high cost of construction, we're looking at deferring a lot of what we had planned, and that would be also including the Port Alberni renovation. Thanks.
I think that's a really good idea. Prices will come down. Okay, Chamber of Commerce, Director Minions.
No report today, thanks.
Okay, Air Quality Council, Dr. Bodner.
Yes, thank you. Yes, we met on June the 4th, and Alex Dyer came and read out the ACRD burning regulations, and he had 919 public consultations that were received. Out of that, we find that we really need to educate the public more about what's involved with burning, and trying to find ways to educate the public. The Island Health is supportive of doing this education as well. There's no new wood stove exchanges. Since last month, there's still 10 exchanges. We have 8 purple monitors now, and the Ministry of Environment is sending us 3 more. The Vancouver Island Air Quality Coordination Group had its first meeting in May, and there was a good attendance. The Air Quality Commission was there, the Ministry of Environment, Island Health, and a few more. And what we were trying to do is work something out where there was a reduction in redundancy of information. This $15,000 grant that was given for the grant application for a healthy public policy was submitted on June the 1st, was twofold. One was to look at air quality on Vancouver Island and the South Coast communities, and also for specifically Port Alberni Valley, to identify the gaps in the official community plans related to air quality, or not, related to air quality. The mill that is out on the Chalwood Mill on Hector Road. Now they're putting in a $15 million upgrade, so it has a potential for air quality implants. And that's it.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, that brings us to the AVICC. Dr. Cote.
Thank you. So we just had our convention, and it was a huge success. Very well received by delegates. We had over 200 delegates, so that was great. We had Joe Roberts was our incredible keynote speaker, and I'm not sure who attended AVICC and who got to hear Joe, but he's the CEO of Skid Row. Talked about his lived experience and success, and really would like to share that with everybody. Maybe we can get the YouTube video or something and share it if anybody would like to see it. Our resolution passed, so That's a great success. We're on to UBCM. And we had a social evening on the Thursday evening, and we had pigs in the blueberries. So a great little resting place for people to visit. So looking forward to next year, and next meeting is, I think, next month. So that's all for now. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Next up, I have the Beaver Creek Water Advisory Committee.
I think you missed West Coast Aquatic Board.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, Director Steer. I checked it off and then just didn't.
I was going to wait to the end of the report. I actually do have a report from West Coast Aquatic. We did have a board meeting that was finally convened. It was an interesting one because my understanding, it had been a long time since there had been one. The two main topics were basically looking at the coastal strategy that is about almost 10 years old, and that they're looking at a refresh and a consultative process. And I believe there will be a role for local government to be participating in that. The other part of it that was brought up was the Blue Economy Strategy, which is another, it's a federal initiative that's going forward that I think has resonance very much so on the West Coast, and there are many implications surrounding it. I thought what might be appropriate at this time is for a suggestion that we invite West Coast Aquatic, Tawny Lem, the executive director, to maybe to a committee of the whole or to a director's meeting to give an update onto the West Coast Aquatic activities, specifically the coastal refresh and the Blue Economy Strategy, and what the potential role of local government, specifically the ACRD in this case, can contribute to those processes. I do think it is very important, some of the initiatives that are being brought forward through the coastal strategy historically, from a regional management perspective, and then once again, from a federal perspective, the Blue Economy Strategy has a direct relevance to many of the communities that the ACRD represents. So I don't know if there's a formal process to invite Tawny. I could do it directly or ask staff to extend an invitation to either a board or committee of the whole.
That's interesting because a committee of the whole means we could have a deeper conversation too, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, let's mull over a committee of the whole, see if there are other items. We can have 2 items or something for that committee of the whole and see what comes up. So I think an update might be beneficial there. So stay tuned.
Yeah, certainly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, now Beaver Creek Water Advisory Committee.
So we're under pressure to fix the leaks, and we'd like to water down some gas tax. So that's it. Can I go on to the next one?
Yes, if you would, and I'll
okay.
follow up.
This one is could be a very long story, but it's not. I'm going to try to keep it really short. Aaron Badessa, who was the leader of the pack, has retired. That's a bit sad to see. I'm not quite sure how they're going to fill those shoes. He's an exceptional person and really was committed to the West Coast or West Island Woodland Advisory Group and communication. One of the things that came out of this was an audit that they did on their wood, their fiber ability, and it showed that 2/3 of the old growth timber of their whole of the TFL was timber that would never be logged. So 1/3 of the old growth timber is in areas that they can actually get at it. It is not restricted, and it's undersized and all of the other things. And 2/3 of that whole product base is not merchantable. So an interesting point when you talk about old growth logging. So that's it for that.
Thank you. And yeah, I wasn't able to make that meeting, but there was a supplemental on the joint declaration by 3 First Nations.
Yes.
Mine being one of them. The only thing I would state is beyond some communications about the state of old growth and the actual numbers involved with old growth going on Vancouver Island. It may be different for other parts of the province, but Old growth is not under threat to the way that the Fairy Creek groups would have you believe. None of the actual information and data or analysis really points in that direction, and that's been verified in multiple places. And I think the only other thing that I'd like to note is the joint declaration is done by Hwayet, Pachidot, and Dididot. Notwithstanding Hwayet, because we're involved in TFL 44, we're involved in forest. We're very active. But one thing I'd like to point out with Dididot, and I'm not certain I need to point it out too hard with this group, is that both Dididot and Pachidot are negotiating a treaty in the final agreement stage with the province and the federal government. And we've been involved at the tables, or at least we were allowed to send someone, a representative, to the negotiating tables every once in a while, the main table meetings, for updates on what's going on. So we've been included as a local government because of the proximity to Dididot, I believe. But the fact that they've gone through the agreement in principle stage does already note that there's an importance already accorded by the community itself in voting for the AIP. They're voting for not only the continuation of the treaty process, but the entire idea of developing a community constitution, which is fundamentally democratic in some way, shape, or form. One thing that's bothering me personally and bothering me from a governance perspective is the attack on First Nations governance models based on the fact that they're Indian Act bands and therefore somehow illegitimate. And that's not the case, especially with Pachidot and Dididot, who have voted as communities, which is the final word, on adopting a fundamentally democratic government with the option of involving hereditary leaders in meaningful ways, the same way that Toquat has their hereditary leaders directly involved in government, but they have elected members as well. So I think what bothers me, and I think should be repeated here in a public meeting, is that elected governments, even if they're under the Indian Act, aren't illegitimate. In fact, in the most cases, people who are elected into positions or leadership are elected because they're trusted leaders within their communities. And this line of logic should not be followed just because the facts don't weigh in the favor of these activists. We shouldn't be creating damage in these communities when these things have seemingly already been settled. I'll get off the soapbox now, but it seems as though things are getting weird in forestry on Vancouver Island at the very least. And I just want to make sure that we're all kind of settling the facts in a right way. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Next up is the Agricultural Development Committee report from Director Shannon.
Thank you. We had a meeting on the 15th, and the ADC's been successful in a couple grants recently. A community connection grant for $5,000 for building resilient coastal gardens on the West Coast, and a community workforce response grant in partnership with North Island College for the Market Gardeners Training Program. And new business through there is they're doing their Shaw community programming with farm tours. They're also working on with the fall fairs doing a Alberni driving tour for farms and hoping to integrate farm stands into that to get more people out checking out where farms actually are and buying produce right from the farm. And through the Systems Change Project, which is that big grant that from the Vancouver Foundation, some of that money was actually just used. We had a workshop on Monday with Colin Dring from UBC, and it was basically a workshop with staff, the ADC, and our AAC committee of how, like a SWOT analysis and how we can be working together, how we might be more effective, how to get more producers on board. And that's the first of next steps. And our next committee meeting is August 17th.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any other reports? Okay, seeing none, could we have a motion to accept the member reports? Thank you, Dr. Roberts, seconded by Dr. Shannon. All those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, we have no unfinished business. Don't believe we have any late business. Question period. Do we have any questions in the email inbox.
Mr. Chair, no, we don't have any questions in the email box today. And there were 4 attendees from the public attending today, but they're no longer on the meeting. So no questions there either.
Okay. The next item then is moving in camera, and I will read out the motion, which lists out the reasons why we'll be going in camera, and then that'll be it for the live broadcast. So this is a motion to close the meeting to the public as per the community charter on under sections 91J, information that is prohibited or information that if it were presented in a document would be prohibited from disclosure under section 21 of FOIPA. And then we have section 21(1)(c)(1) of FOIPA, the disclosure of which could reasonably be expected to harm significantly the competitive position or interfere significantly with the negotiating position of the third party. Then secondly, we have 91F, law enforcement. If the board considers that disclosure can reasonably affected to harm the conduct of an investigation under or enforcement of an enactment. And then 91C, which are labor relations or other employee relations. Do we have a seconder? I'll move it. Thank you, Dr.